All right, everyone. Welcome to another episode of David's Saturday Night Sit Back. This afternoon, I'm really excited to welcome Laura Ollinger to the show. She's a teen and parent well-being coach, and Laura has her bachelor's in economics, Spanish, literature, her master's in health and wellness, and she studied functional medicine and coaching. She's a brain health coach, a nationally recognized health and wellness coach, has a certificate, from HeartMath for studying stress, anxiety, and self-regulation, and is an elite dual certified Neruoencoding Specialist. Ultimately, Lo, you launched Positively Healthy Coaching in December of 2021 here in Austin, Texas. Laura, you're here today to talk all things being a parent, navigating what it means to be a teenager in 2024. I have a ton of teens in my life that I love and I respect, and so I'm really excited to see where this conversation goes. Welcome to your episode of David's Saturday Night Sit Back.
Awesome. Thanks so much. Great to be here.
Yeah. Welcome. Are you happy?
Very happy.
What are you happy about?
My life.
What about your life makes you happy?
Well, it's funny that you say that because I don't know if you're familiar with the Wheel of Life, where there's actually, I don't know the number, but I think it's 8 categories. So it's like finance, health, spirituality, relationship, like romantic relationship, and then, social relationship or familial relationship, career. And what am I missing? I feel like there's another one. There is some Wheel of Lives have environmental, but I'm leaving that one out. So anyway, I've been working on kind of balance and harmony in my life. And last year, I kind of let my health go a little bit. I wasn't working out as much. So I'm already on track for 2024, kind of getting that part of my Wheel of Life up in balance. But I'm in a great romantic partnership right now. My kids are doing awesome. My career is awesome. All those things I think are pretty strong. There's always room for improvement in everybody's life. There's always kind of new goals to set. But I feel like none of those areas are completely deficient, in certain ways that they could be. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I do know what you mean. I'm very happy for you that you feel like your things are balanced and that all 8 areas. I think I saw the wheel posted on your Instagram. At least once you posted it. Yeah.
Yeah.
So when one of those things becomes off balance, what do you do? Or do you? Yeah, I'll just leave it at that.
For myself?
Yeah, for yourself.
Oh, well, the first kind of step is to recognize that. And then the second step is to decide, well, what do I want to do about it? Right? Because I could easily just kind of let one of those things go. For example, the health thing, not making it to the gym. It's like I knew it was happening. And I've always been big into working out. I actually... it wasn't on my intro because it was so long ago, but a long time ago, I was a personal trainer for a short period of time because I was always been into health and fitness and working out. And it bothered me last year that I was kind of letting that go. But because I was so busy on my career, on my kids, on my relationship, that it was letting go, and I had to be okay with that. And so it bothered me, but I was like, I got to get some peace around this. And so I don't think I ever really got to the point of being peace, because you should not feel peace if you're not kind of putting your physical health as any type of priority. Right. That should bother you. And so I realized it was, and so I'm real good about, clean slate 2024. They say if you have a New Year's resolution, that the average person quits their resolution by January 18th. And it's called Quitter's Day by some...
I didn't know that was a thing.
That is a thing by some researchers. That's what they call it. And so for me, resolution it's not even in my vocabulary. I don't even really use that word because for me, and it's not even truly a goal. It's more of just a way of life. It's a way of being. And so when something becomes a priority, I just automatically do it. It's in my subconscious. It's in my conscious. And I think, how am I going to fit this in my day or my week or my month? What's the plan for that? And then I'm pretty good at executing once I have a plan.
There you go. There you go. Well, that's something that I had no idea about you, that you and me have in common, that we were both personal trainers for a stint. I also don't have it posted on my Instagram, my LinkedIn. You can't find it anywhere unless I got certified through AFA. So if they happen to keep a database of like everyone that's got certified through them, you might be able to see my name there. But yeah, that's something that was in 2008. Which feels like a lot longer than 15 years. But...
Oh, yeah. Mine was before that. Let's see here, 2001. is when the tech bubble crashed. And I don't know if you're going to ask me these questions, but I was between jobs. I was in Boston and I just needed something to fill, my resume and fill that gap. And it was something that I'm like, oh, I can walk in a gym, get a job today, start training through their program, and then, kind of look for full-time work on the side.
Right. Yeah. It's a good time filler for sure. And for me, I loved working out. I never had worked out in a traditional gym. Got a job on accident when I was 18 in the kids department, did that for a year full time. And after 40 hours a week of watching other people's kids, I was like, okay, I need to go. So I was going to quit, but the manager fortunately was kind enough to say, no, why don't you get certified and work as a personal trainer instead? And as a in between time while you're studying for your exams, you can work the front desk. And that ended up turning into an 11-year career where I ended up operating my own gym. And it was super fun. It was awesome.
That's neat.
I loved it.
Yeah. Well, we found out something about you today.
There you go. There it is. I worked with kids for a year. So one thing I wanted to ask you is I covered in that 30-second introduction, I covered like 20 years of your life in seconds. What sort of went through your head as you remembered some of those things and recalled some of those things that maybe you haven't thought about in a while?
Well, yeah, some of that was a lifetime ago.
Right.
I like that was an old version of me. So it's hard it's funny because it kind of it makes sense if you understand like the entire kind of bird's eye view of it. So when I was in college, I thought, oh, I want to be in business. And so I struggled with classes in the business schools, particularly the financial classes, but for some reason economics just came very easily to me. It's very visual with all the graphs and the charts, and somehow it just made sense. And so I thought I'm going to have a career somehow in business. And simultaneously, I also had a lot of credits in Spanish. So I'm like, I might as well do a dual degree. And so I ended up doing that. I have not used the Spanish. That's the one thing that has kind of gone by the wayside. It does come in handy if you're traveling out of town, but or to a different country. But no, it's funny because then I got into advertising. Well, no, sorry, I got out of order. I was in high tech at first. So I started my first kind of major corporate job was for a startup internet company in Boston, and it was called Direct Hit, and it was started by a bunch of techie guys who thought they had this awesome algorithm to create a search engine, and it ended up getting bought out by Ask Jeeves, which is now ask.com. And I don't know if you know that.
I know Jeeves.
Oh, you know Jeeves, the butler. Okay, yeah. So I learned a lot there, and I got into the marketing department, and so that was really helpful for me. And then I'm not sure if you really still want me to keep going on the whole life story here, but
go for it.
Oh, okay. Yeah. So then I ended up going kind of strangely took a left turn and started working still in kind of marketing and client relations, but for a financial advisor. And that just went on for several years. And then I got married, became a mom, and did some work from home, but it wasn't kind of my top priority. My top priority was raising my 4 kids, who are all literally within 4.5 years of each other. They're all back to back. The first 2 are like Irish twins, like 13 months apart. And then the next one came and the next one came. And so that kept me extremely busy. But the big kind of, I think the part that is juicy, I guess you could say, is I kind of went through a major personal crisis, and that is what really shifted me. And so I ended up having to get a divorce. My ex-husband was having an affair. And, when you're a stay-at-home mom and you haven't really been actively building your resume or actively working in the workforce, it is terrifying to say, well, how am I now going to support myself and these 4 kids with not a lot of, current work history? And so I was like, I got to figure this out. And so I ended up enrolling myself in a career coaching course. It's called, I'm going to name it because it was actually so helpful. I recommend it. It's called A Path That Fits.
Okay.
And so it's a very rigorous, very intensive. It's for someone who's just kind of having a career crisis and they don't know what to do. And so it had me do all sorts of kind of introspective work, lots of activities. We even had to email our kind of older friends, not like current friends, but old friends, to say, what do you see me doing? And so I got lots of input from friends, and they thought, oh, you should do this, you should do that. And so one of the activities that was for me the biggest game changer was, they had us go to Barnes & Noble. Actually, I went on barnesandnoble.com, and they said, why don't you just scroll through all the categories of books, and whatever you gravitate towards the most, it can't be fiction, it has to be, nonfiction.
Sure.
That is where your passion lies. And so I find myself in the psychology section and I find myself in the health section. And I'm like, well, that makes sense because my whole life I've been interested in psychology and I've been always interested in health. So then I heard of something called a health coach, and I'm like, I don't even know what that is. I wanted to find out more about that.
Yeah.
So long story short, I ended up enrolling in the Functional Medicine Health Coaching Certification Academy, FMCA, Functional Medicine Coaching Academy, which is through the Institute of Functional Medicine. And then simultaneously, I thought, well, why not be in one school? Why don't I be in two schools? And that's when, let's make it harder. So I ended up that's when I got my master's in education and health and wellness, because I truly didn't know what my vision was just yet. I just knew I was going to do something. And I thought I might as well get the education so that it opens the most doors for me. And so that's kind of how it happened.
That's an awesome story, and thank you for sharing that. Mm-hmm. That's great. I think a lot of people. One thing I was just talking about with my neighbor that I mentioned before we started recording yesterday is it's sort of strange to me how, as a culture, at 18 years old, we have this expectation that our teens should know what they should want to do with their lives. And it's like, here I am at 36 years old, and I started this podcast last year when I was 35. So I loved it. So I figured it out 17 years later. It took me 17 years of getting an accounting degree, going to work for a public accounting firm, realizing that while we need accountants, it's not for me and I need someone else to do. It took me so long to finally sort of figure out, like, who is David? What does he want to do with his life? Mm-hmm. And I think that we sometimes think that I got my degree in accounting, I have to stay in this for life. And you really don't. It may be scary to make that switch, and there may be some risk involved, and it may cost you spending some money, but ultimately you don't have to pigeonhole yourself in one thing for the rest of your life because it's what you quote unquote should do. It's okay to adapt and change, or in your case, you were forced to. You went through a divorce and then you were like, I have 4 kids and we have bills to pay. So how are we going to do this in a job? I don't want just any job though. I want a job where I can actually thrive in it, which is awesome for you.
Yeah, thanks so much. And it was funny because when I first got started, you kind of go through the whole imposter syndrome, like, can I do this? I just got this degree. How do I don't know what I'm doing. But really, what I realized is that everything I had been doing my whole life was preparing me for this moment, that moment in time to get this started. All that experience that I'd had doing those other jobs gave me the life skills, the human, ability to communicate with humans, the ability to empathize with humans, kind of that business savvy. And so it all kind of came together.
I know we both said that we're not coffee snobs, but what do you think of this coffee?
It's a little iffy.
I'm so unprepared today. I'm sorry.
Okay.
I'm sorry. Guys, I ran out of coffee filters, and so the only thing I had was this instant coffee.
Yeah.
And it said 1 scoop per 16 ounces, and I don't know how many ounces this cup is, but I figured I'll just do 1 scoop and then fill it up to the top. It's not bad. It's not great.
It's drinkable.
It's drinkable.
It meets the threshold.
It's not the worst thing I've ever had.
Yeah. I'm not going to spit it out.
Right. So your 4 kids, we won't talk about them too much, but one thing I was curious about, so was their exact ages. So my family, my mom, or my oldest sister currently is 43. Older brother is 39. I'm 36. The other one, my next sister was born in 97, so 26, and then 2003, so 20.
Oh, wow.
So 20 to 43. So they had 5 kids over a span of 23 years. But you had your 4 kids in 4 years, you said?
4.5 years.
4.5 years.
Yeah.
So what are their ages now?
So my oldest is 15. I have a daughter who's a sophomore in high school. And then my son is 14. They're the 13 months apart, but he's in 8th grade.
Okay.
And then I have a 12-year-old son who's in 7th grade. And then my youngest is 11. She's in 5th grade.
That's cool.
Yeah.
I liked your guys' Christmas picture.
Oh, thanks. Did you see that?
Yeah. Your son was flexing, and you said something about, like, I try to keep everyone in their Christmas outfits.
Yeah.
But
they just ripped them off.
That didn't work. Yeah.
They're like, hey, Mom, can we take off our shirts now? I'm like, okay, fine.
Whatever.
And the
Can you hold on
photographer's
1
like,
minute?
the photographer's like, this is too good. I got to get this.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
That's awesome. So one question I had for you is, do you feel like I should have thought about how to phrase this. You, as part of your job, you do coach teens.
Yes.
Do you find yourself coaching your kids at times, or do you try to be? Is Laura mom different from Laura coach? Am I making any sense at all? What I'm trying to get at?
That's a very good question. The answer is I do not coach my kids. They don't want to be coached. They are like, you're our mom. And so, but what I do use subtly, and they don't know it because it's not a coaching technique, it's more like listening techniques, communication techniques, emotional regulation techniques. So, when things go awry, which they do when you have teenagers in the house, and I'm kind of known as the house where they come to me, the friends come over. We kind of have a big hangout at all times. I always have snacks. We have a fire pit now. It's we have the weights in the garage, so the boys love to hang out in there. The gym, they call it the Gonky Kong gym. So there's a lot of stress involved in being a single mom, and I am very busy. And so kind of some of the things I use from my coaching, which is just to take a deep breath, reflect on the situation. Yeah, do it right now. Whew, right? Yeah. Just reflect on the situation, kind of put it in perspective. Like, is what's happening right now really the end of the world? Except I don't say that to my kids, but in my head or whatever I'm going through, I realize this is just peanuts compared to some big problems. And so it kind of has helped me be a better mom, but I'm not coaching my kids.
I like that. One of when you were talking about the communication styles and some things that you just do naturally as a parent, I went through your entire Instagram page, all 401 posts or however many there is. I think one of my favorite ones, and I don't know why this one stuck out to me, it just did for one reason or another, was where you were talking about becoming your kid's confidant.
Oh.
I love that aspect of being the go-to person that your kids can trust and talk to. I feel like I'm the confidant for a few teens at my gym, as I was telling you on the phone. I don't know how it happened. Maybe they asked me for a spot, and then after that, we just started talking. But I know some stuff about the teens at my gym that we're going to talk about today. But as a parent, I wonder how many parents ask themselves that, like, am I the most trusted source for my kids to go to? If they had something really good happen and they wanted to celebrate, would they come to me? If they had something really bad happen and they needed a vent or cry, could they come to me? But I like that you put that perspective out there as be your kid's secret informant, be their go-to for the good, the bad, and everything in between.
Yeah. Yeah, and that's no easy job because we're humans, and so the thing is we're going to react and respond to what our kids are telling us. And so I think that's really I have a whole module in my online parenting course that is self-awareness. And so we want to be aware of what is it that we're kind of feeding back to them. And it could even be energetically. Like we might be making a facial expression. Oh, tell me, like, how did you break up with your boyfriend? And then we're like frowning and we're like disapproving. And they're like, oh, Mom, why am I telling you this? You're frowning. I don't want to tell you this, right? Because they're very sensitive to our reaction. And the other reason why most teenagers don't want to tell their parents everything is because they don't want to get in trouble. They don't want to be judged. They don't want to, feel the need to get advice because parents are so hyper about giving advice. And if you could just listen to your kid and not give advice, you're winning. That is great. Just kind of listen to them. And it's sometimes, if they're making a really stupid mistake, either A, you let them, or B, you say, would you like my suggestion? Would you like my ideas about that? Would you like some help on that topic? And they can say no. And then you have to respect that and just be like, okay, totally get it. If you do need me, feel free. I'm here. Come back if you have any more questions. Yeah. Right?
Do you feel like your kid's confidant? Have you been able to pull that off?
Definitely my 15-year-old. Oh, thanks. Yeah.
High five. Well done. As soon as I asked that question, I was like, maybe that's too personal. I should have been putting you on the spot.
No, it's okay because I mean, it's okay. And they all have different personalities. So she loves to blab, and she loves, even from school, she'll text me about what boy she just saw at the water fountain and what happened in chemistry class and who told her she looked cute today. But it can become very personal and very private. Right. But I've become very good at just kind of being a non-judgmental person for her, a safe person for her. My boys are a little bit more private, because they have their little girlfriends that they like, and they don't, share quite as much, but they always know that I'm available, and they know that I'm going to just be there to listen and support them no matter what. And then my youngest, she's in 5th grade, so not too much teenage drama just yet. Yeah.
There you go. Well, before we get, we're naturally flowing into the subject of teens pretty quick. Before we get on that, which will be the bulk of this episode, I wanted to ask you personally, or not personally, but about you. where's home, or where were you born? Were you raised in Austin, Texas, or did you move here at some point?
Good question. I'm from St. Louis, Missouri.
Oh, cool. Okay.
Midwesterner, and then went to college in Dallas, and then after that moved to Boston, was there for quite a while, and I've been in Austin for almost 16 years now.
How'd you decide to land in Austin specifically? Do you recall?
Yeah, it was just a great place to raise a family. I was so tired of the Boston weather. I could not handle it. It is long. It's cold till June. You're wearing your ski jacket. I used to have dogs, and I'd walk the dogs, and I'm freezing. I'm like, it's June. This is silly. This is ridiculous, actually. But really, I'm drawn to the people here. I'm drawn to kind of the open-mindedness, the culture. It's a kind of a melting pot. People come here from all over. But at the same time, once you're here, it's very welcoming. And so I just love it.
So when I think about all the podcast guests and even like look on this wall, like Tom right here, he's from Boston. And there have probably been, maybe not on the wall specifically, but like he's from California. He was in China for a while. She moved here from Israel. But when it comes to Boston specifically, it seems like Austin has a heavy influx of people from Boston. Oh. You meet a lot of people because of the nature of your job. Do you find that as well, or is that just a weird fluke that I somehow ran into?
Maybe it's you.
Maybe it's me. That's fair.
No, I'm kidding. I have met several people that have moved here from there, but not a ton. But it's more the Californians that I meet a lot of, and just other places around the country. Yeah.
When you think back on your childhood, anywhere from age of 0 to, I don't know, 18, 19, 20, 21, somewhere in there, is there anything that was pivotal, any event, good or bad, or anything that you feel like sort of shaped who you eventually became today?
Oh, yeah. I mean, we're going to get very personal. And I'm an open book.
If you don't mind, I was going to say,
totally.
I love getting personal.
Yeah, I do too, because I feel like if it can help somebody or guide somebody, I want to do that. So I realized, if I could change my story, what it would be is when I was in high school in 10th grade, I started getting attention from some boys. And I'm like, oh, this feels nice. And so I started dating, and I realized I was just ending up with like a bad dude, kind of like a bad dude who didn't have my best interest at heart. And I feel like I didn't have a strong enough sense of self to be confident to, say, no, I don't want to be with this person anymore, to break off the relationship, or to say, what would be better for me? Oh, maybe spending more time getting to know myself, or be with girlfriends. And so I kind of just allowed that to guide me. It was almost like kind of pulling me. And then I had another boyfriend. He was a great guy, but I realized it's almost like my identity became, I'm a girlfriend. And that then became my story of then becoming a wife. And so then when I went through, I'm fast forwarding about 30 years here, then when I, had to face my divorce, my identity was very confused. I didn't know who I was. And I only knew myself as a partner to someone. And I didn't know myself as an individual and how I can stand on my own 2 feet and feel confident and start my own career and just be me. And it's like, what do I like? I'm so used to kind of catering to what other people like, my kids, my ex-husband, making them happy, that I never really took time to make myself happy. And so that's why I realized it really started in high school, but even I could backtrack, trace it back a little bit to middle school, where I didn't think, I know I didn't have the confidence. And it's very common. That's why I have a job, because middle schoolers and high schoolers are very insecure, extremely insecure. But I feel like if back then I could have started to form my identity, and even then, I probably would have been on a different trajectory in my life. But that's okay, because I'm happy now, and I'm happy that I had to kind of go through some sad times in order to get to where I am now.
Now that if you look at your life as it is today, with your kids, your job, and the podcast, everything else that you have going on, if you could change, if there is a genie that showed up and said, Laura, you could change, you could get rid of one of these boyfriends, you could change some part of your story, would you change anything, or would you leave it as is?
Ooh, that is so hard. That is such a hard question. I don't think I have an answer to that, other than it might be kind of a big deal. I would want to change who I married, except then I wouldn't have my kids.
Right.
They wouldn't exist. And so my ex-husband is still a pain in the ass. So it's a thorn. I think, why did I choose this person? And I question my choices. Like, what was I thinking at that time? But at the same time, like I said, they wouldn't exist, and I obviously wouldn't trade them for anything. So I don't think I would. I think I would just be like, okay, this is my life, and this is what I do, and this is who I am, and I'm going to stick with it.
Again, to your point about how it could be helpful, I want to ask, do you recall how old were you when you and your ex-husband got together?
Oh, well, we met in college. So okay. I was a senior in college. I was, I think, 20, had just turned 21. And so we had been together, the thing I realized is that I didn't go through a typical developmental stage, which is typically in your 20s, is when you're supposed to be dating, you're supposed to be meeting people, trying out different relationships, trying on what feels good. It's kind of like trying on different outfits.
Yeah.
You want to like say, oh, this feels soft, or this is rough, or this is uncomfortable, or this is too tight, and kind of go through it all. Like I fully support people just date, like serial dating, and not really committing or settling down until you're, they say that the prefrontal cortex, well, not that they say, but scientists have proven that the prefrontal cortex isn't fully developed until you're 26 years old. And that is the executive function of our brain. That's where we make our decisions. And so it's like I was making a decision for my future that I wasn't really prepared to make. I didn't even have the structural brain anatomy to make a decision that was going to, make or break the rest of my life.
Right. And do you recall when you guys decided to get married, if you could go back and try to remember your train of thought at the time, do you know why you said yes?
I do. Well, not only do I know why I said yes, I was like I was kind of pressuring him, like, when are we going to get engaged? Because we'd been together for 5 years. I felt like that was a long enough time. It's like we either need to get married or break up, because we can't just be this like dating non-committed couple, because I knew I wanted to have kids and I wanted to get married. And so I know exactly what it was. I was insecure, and I felt like, oh, I'm not going to be able to find anybody else. Nobody else is going to like me, or in order to find someone else, I'm going to have to go through so much. I would have like left Boston. I would have had to, start a new career. I would have had to change. I was settled. Yeah. And to make that type of a life change, to be like, okay, I'm going to break up with my boyfriend. I'm going to sell my condo. I'm going to go find a job in another city. That it felt too hard and too scary. And I truly didn't have the confidence to believe that I could pull that off and still find someone and have a great relationship and make it all happen.
Yeah. Apologies in advance for making this analogy, because it's two wildly different things. But when I wanted to start the podcast, I ended up moving out here from Sacramento, California.
Okay.
And part of the reason was because I feel like I was really lucky, blessed, whatever word you want to use. I had a really great life in Sacramento. I had a lot of friends, a lot of family, and I was constantly on the go. It was go to work, go see these friends, go to work, go see family. And so I almost felt like I needed to put myself in like exile for a little bit and to free up some time. And when I started looking for different places around the country about where would be a good city with lots of interesting people to do live interviews, Austin, Texas was like the duh, like, yes, go there. And to your point about it being scary and about it being hard, was it almost seemed like some impossible thing. Like it was like, no way, I'll never leave my hometown. This will never happen. Like, move out of Sacramento, move away from friends, move away from family. Like, this is the dumbest thing ever. But then as I ended up just signing a lease on this apartment as sort of my way of like, well, you can't not go now. Like, you have a legal document. Yeah. So I started getting rid of all my things, and I moved out here in just my car. I put as much as I could into the trunk. I put the dog in the passenger seat, and we drove 1,800 miles over the course of 2 days and landed in Austin, Texas. And once I got out here, I sort of had this realization of, and the weeks that followed and up to this point today, I realized it wasn't that hard. And I don't know why mentally it seemed like it was this impossible thing to move out of your hometown. But for you, it's interesting to reflect how you felt like you wouldn't have been able to find another boyfriend / husband. I never thought I could leave my hometown, but both of us did, and our lives are better for it. And I don't know. I just wanted to take sort of 2 or 3 minutes just to let the audience know, like, both of us made these major changes that were scary and maybe seemed impossible. But now when we see where we're at in life today, I'm so grateful that I made it out here.
Oh, good. Well, yours was a little more optional. Like, I kind of got forced. Like, once I got the divorce going, I had no choice. I'm like, okay, I have to figure this out.
Yep.
And the bridges were burned. There was no going back to my old life or my old way of being. I just had to create my new self. And so it was funny because, then I started dating and I started going on the apps, and I'm like, oh, so this is, and I'm in my 40s, and I'm like, oh, so this is how it happens. And I realized I just have to believe in myself. I have to believe that I'm an awesome person and I'm a valuable person and that anybody would be lucky to have me. And it's so funny because then I went out on tons and they all loved me. They're all asking for second and third and fourth dates. And I'm like, oh, sorry, I have to go out with someone else. I'm too busy now. Yeah. So it's funny. I mean, I wish I would have known that about myself back then, that it was really all in my head. It was not me. It was just what I believed about myself. It was my beliefs that I wasn't, desirable, and which is insane because now I have this amazing boyfriend and, he tells me every day how awesome I am. And so it's like, oh, so this is what it's like to feel good and feel wanted. But I don't necessarily need him to say that. You just have to believe it in yourself first.
Why did you feel personally like you were not desirable?
I can't necessarily put my finger on it. It's like I don't have any tangible proof. It's something that it was just, I think, because they're, your brain is patterns. And so that's what I think in seventh grade, I felt, like the ugly ducking. I had the braces and the big, back then, it was the 80s, or no, it was the 90s. I don't know what year it was. We had the big bangs. Yep. And it's so awkward to look at now. You're like, oh, why was this our style? It was very ugly. But yeah, all the girls, I mean, not just me. Like, I was like, that is just not attractive. It's not flattering. But, that was the style at the time. It was attractive at the time. I should reframe that. It was attractive at the time. Yeah. And, so somehow I just got this belief about myself that I'm like, oh, I don't have the right things to be worthy.
And when you, another thing that you mentioned is you got on the apps for the first time, because when you met your boyfriend, I'm assuming, well, I didn't ask you your age, but I'm assuming you guys didn't meet through the apps. You met through college. So that was your first time dating via apps, correct? Yes. And did you meet your boyfriend through an app, or did it happen somewhere else?
I actually just met him organically.
Cool.
Everyone else, every other date I'd had was the apps, but I just happened to meet in person.
What did you think about the experience on the apps? Positive, neutral, negative? What was your takeaway?
It's a lot of work. It feels like a job.
Yes, it does.
Because there's a lot of just kind of weeding out, swipe left, swipe left. Yep. And so then to find someone like, oh, this may be, and then the chat, and the chat is kind of awkward. It's unnatural. It's not, you have to say something to get somebody's attention, to sound like you're cool and interesting. And that's not how we do it in real life. And so it's just a little forced. It's a little contrived, but then you get to the point of the date. And somehow I feel like I'm pretty great on a first date.
There you go.
Yeah, I just learned how to really like tap into my kind of heart space, my feelings. It's not about like sitting there in front of someone and giving them your resume. Like I'm not using my brain and telling them all the facts about myself. I'm just kind of like feeling it, and I'm really authentic, and I do share. If I'm not going to tell them my life story, but if they ask, why are you divorced? I'll tell them. I'll tell them the truth. I'm not going to just be like, oh no, try to gloss over the ugly stuff, because the ugly stuff is part of the truth.
I had an image consultant and dating coach on the show a couple of months ago.
Oh, cool.
And she said that guys are notorious for lying about their height and their age.
Oh my God. I don't know about the age thing, but the height thing. I swear every guy puts at least 1 to 2 inches, and then I meet them and I'm like, bullshit. Am I allowed to say that? Sorry.
Yes.
Oh, okay.
Yes, you can say whatever you want.
And the reason why I know it, because I know exactly how tall my ex-husband was. He was 5'10". And so when I would wear 3-inch heels, because I would be eye level with him. So I could literally measure any guy, and I'm like, are we eye level? Are you lower? Are you a little bit higher? I would know. I'm like, you are not the 6 feet that you say you are, because right now we're eye level, and that's not doable. I'm not wearing 6-inch heels, and I know that.
It's so a funny story for you is when I went to get my physical in 2021, I was measured at 6 foot exactly. And then when I went in 2022, they were like, they took it and they said, oh, you're 5'11" and a half or something like that. And I was like, no, I'm not. I really like having that 6 foot. I'm like, I got shorter. Yeah. So ever since then, I've been like very like self-aware of my posture, because I'm like, I didn't shrink, like something, or maybe I did. I don't know if humans can get smaller.
Yeah, they do.
They can?
Yeah.
Oh, awful.
Because I've lost like a quarter of an inch. I used to be 5'6", I was going to say, but I'm like 5'5"3/4" or something now.
There you go.
Yeah.
Well, before we get into positively healthy coaching, first off, thank you for right off the bat being so genuine and transparent about just your own history and your upbringing and whatnot. Is there anything else that you think is noteworthy before we jump into PHC? And does anyone call it PHC, or did I just make that up?
I do in my head.
Okay, cool. I just assumed that was okay to call it that.
Yeah.
So that's positively healthy coaching, everyone.
Yeah,
I love acronyms, and PHC is a little bit easier to say for the rest of the episode.
Yeah.
I'll probably just say PHC. But
Totally.
is there anything else in your life that you feel is noteworthy that happened leading up to launching that in 2021?
Nothing that really stands out. I could just for fun tell you a little side note story.
I love stories. Go.
Oh, okay. So you know how I said I had that Spanish degree? Well, actually, I had a mission to move to Argentina for a year. And so my senior year spring break, I flew down there by myself and did job interviews at different companies that I kind of somehow got. And I was like, this would be crazy to like just go up and move. It's funny because then I was too afraid to move, right, later. But this was when I was still, there was a part of me. It's not that I was always like not confident. There was part of me that was very adventurous, very capable of kind of doing something just pretty out there. And my vision was to move there for just a year or two, really become very fluent with Spanish, and then come back to the States and then kind of get back on the normal path of then finding the husband and then, right? But I had that in me. And so I don't want that to go kind of by the wayside as far as who I am in my core. And then I do want to tell one other story that I do feel like is really important. When I was 2 or 3, we were at Disney World, my family, and my mom, it was kind of like the 5 o'clock, like go back to the hotel and get ready for dinner. We were on the monorail, and I wanted to get off the monorail by myself. My mom's hand was always real clammy and sweaty, and she like wanted me to hold, I was 3, she wanted to hold my hand so I wouldn't get trampled by all the crowds of people. And she like grabbed my hand and like pulled me off, and I got out on the little blacktop there, and I lay down and I screamed bloody murder because I was so upset that my mom wouldn't let me do it by myself because I was saying, me do it. That was my language back then. And because I had this very strong drive that I was independent enough. I could walk myself off the monorail, but my mom wouldn't allow me because she was trying to keep me safe. And my mom was so mortified because people thought I was getting kidnapped. And so it's funny because I kind of, my mom, she did.
Oh no.
Yeah, it was humiliating because I'm literally screaming. People see this woman like pulling this little girl, and everybody's like, what is happening here? Because I was very resistant. I was using all my body weight, all like 40 pounds or whatever I had to to restrain her from pulling me. And it came up. Okay, I do want to say one more thing. I was very passionate about going to therapy when I first found out about my husband's betrayal. It was very important to me to do some healing work on myself because it was devastating. And so in one therapy session, I was somehow that story came up, and I told the therapist, and he goes, normally I might not care about that, instincting you, but there's something very notable about that. For him, the therapist, to kind of pull that out in me, that I had this very strong will, very determined, very stubborn, because that was really only such a small part of me, but I've had to like tap into that in order to kind of get to where I am now.
Thank you for, sorry, sometimes when people tell me a story, I need to sometimes just sit on it for a few seconds to sort of digest it. And that just brought me back to when you were saying about how teens tell you stories and then about how they're dating, they give you a look. I'm sorry if I gave you a negative look. I didn't mean to.
It wasn't negative.
I was just sort of soaking it in because what went through my head was, what was going through my head was a few minutes ago, you were talking about how, you married your first husband because you didn't know if you'd be able to find another boyfriend. But yet then there's this other little girl, little Laura, who's also like amazingly independent. Yeah. And so my pause was because those almost sound like two very different people.
Yeah. It's totally strange when I have had to do a lot of work on myself and kind of figure these things out. And I do a lot of journaling, and I'm like, wait a second, where was this girl when I needed her? When I needed to be able to like walk away from, just settling for marrying that person because he was convenient. I could have used the me do it back then and be like, screw this, I'm out of here. I'm moving. I'm going to find someone that feels more right to me. And so it's funny because we kind of shut off certain parts of ourselves that aren't convenient. And because sometimes those parts of ourselves are not we're not proud of, but I'm proud of that side of myself. And so I'm like, why did that part of me get so quieted and so kind of pushed down? And the answer is, I'm not really sure. Maybe that's my next journaling exercise, but somehow it's back and it's in full force.
Yay.
Yeah.
I mean, at the end of the day, my next question was going to be why do you think that little girl got quieter? But you just said it's something that you're still reflecting on and whatnot.
Yeah.
But so fast forward then to, was it in 2021 that PHC officially was launched, or when did that happen?
Yes, you have it right there. Yep.
Okay, cool. Why?
That is such an open-ended question. I'm trying to decide how to go with that. But
Well, or I guess to be a little bit more specific,
Yeah.
what were you doing before, and why did you want to become a coach?
Okay. Well, so I had gone through that career coaching class,
Yep.
decided I wanted to be the health coach.
Yep.
And then because coaches hire other coaches, that's what we do. Because once you decide coaching is amazing, you want coaches for all areas of your life.
Right.
So I hired a business coach, and the business coach was the one that helped me hone in on what it was I was really passionate about. Because initially when you become a health coach, they say, go with the thing you're most passionate about. And a lot of times it's like, oh, you're very passionate about thyroid disease or hormones or weight loss or diabetes or helping people quit smoking or some area.
Yeah.
Right. And I never had a physical area that I could really get fired up about, that I was like, this is going to drive me every day. This is what's going to get me out of bed, until I was talking with my business coach, and we kind of determined that teenagers became my passion. And I know you're going to ask this question, so I'll just tell you. I lost my nephew at a young age. He took his own life. And that was just a obviously massive wake-up call for me, but also it kind of woke up something that was already inside of me, already brewing. So when my kids were little, when they're little, you're just trying to keep them from drinking the Drano out from underneath the sink and keep them from falling off the playground, right? You don't want any broken bones and going to the emergency room,
Yep.
and right? You're really just trying to keep them physically safe. But I was kind of aware of the concept of this day and age with social media and phones, that it is a hard world out there for teenagers and their mental health. And so, like I said, I already knew there was an issue with teenagers. And so then when that happened with my nephew, simultaneously, my oldest daughter was having, some level of social anxiety and some anxiety in general. And she struggled a lot. She struggled in social situations. And so that is why I decided to work with teenagers, because I really wanted to help them because of what they're dealing with today. But also, they always say you're healing an earlier version of yourself. So when you're a coach, that's what you're doing. That's what your work is. And I realized I'm healing that 7th grade version of me who didn't feel good enough. I'm healing that 10th grade version of me who was just dating guys and not paying attention to girlfriends and myself. I'm like, I want every girl and guy, because I do work with boys too, to feel good about themselves, to feel confident, to feel like they're enough on their own, and that they don't need to be in a dating relationship in order to be complete. You're complete already. You were complete the day you were born. Well, you were complete technically before the day you were born, but you were complete as a human. You were there, and you're enough as you are, and your self-worth comes from just your birthright. That is your birthright.
I remember hearing on another podcast, I wish I could remember the podcast or who the guest was, but there's this one memory I have where someone was talking about dating and how much they hate the term your other half, because you are you. Laura is 100% Laura.
Yeah.
You're not half of you, and then you find the rest of your identity through your partner. You are you.
Right.
You don't, the other half doesn't exist.
Yeah.
I'm 100% David. My identity, my sense of humor, what I find funny, my passions, that is all me. So when you're in the dating scene, you're not looking for your other half. He just hated that term. And I don't know why that rant it's got stuck in my head, even though I have no idea who said it. So I'm sorry, I can't give you credit, but
Yeah, no, and it makes so much sense. And I've learned a lot about what was going on within myself, and that's really codependency, where you don't feel complete unless you have someone else. And so it's funny because I actually now coach. One of my clients that I had last night is a boy. He's 17 and he's in a relationship. And so one of the things we spend the most time talking about is his dating relationship. And he's kind of that anxious. I don't know if you know about attachment styles, attachment theory, but he's on the anxious side. So there's avoidant attachment where you're like, oh, I need some space from this relationship. I'm feeling suffocated by this person. They won't stop calling me or texting me. And then there's the anxious style where you constantly need the reassurance and you want the text and you want the phone calls and you want the together time. And then there's the healthy style, which is just neutral. It's where ideally the kind of perfect, and I mean, we're veering off track into dating right now, which is
fine. Okay. That's podcasting. You veer off.
You do veer off.
Yeah.
But it's very, it reflects on my life and my work. So I think it's pretty relevant, actually, where you have to feel complete on your own, but where the goal is interdependent. So it's not independence, but it's interdependence, where you can feel strong enough as you are that you can be in a relationship, but you're not giving yourself away. Does that make sense?
Yeah. So you said you're the client that you were talking. How do you like to refer to your clients? Do you say client? Or
clients. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So the 17-year-old client that you were working with last night, you said he is more on the anxious side.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
And does he know that?
Yeah, I've told him.
And what was his, would he mind you saying what was his reaction when you told him?
Well, he's not surprised. He's the one that came to me and said, he has a lot of repetitive thoughts, and he described it as anxiety, and he described it as, I can't remember the word he used now, but it just kind of like repetitive thinking. Oh, overthinking. That was the word he always says. He's like, I'm overthinking. And so to give him a term.
That's me, bro, by the way.
Oh, you're an overthinker?
You're not alone.
Oh, no.
I overanalyze everything.
Oh, no.
For better or for worse.
Yeah. And that's okay to be an overthinker, but when you're doing it in a relationship, because then you come across as needy. And so then that is giving off the vibe to the girlfriend that you're like needy. And then suddenly you become a job, and you don't want to be a job for your significant other. Like suddenly it's like work to have to satisfy their neediness. And so, yeah, I gave him the term. I gave him the term that I explained what attachment theory is. I told him the styles, and he said, oh, you're right. That's exactly how it feels. And so to give someone a term, it helps them understand what it is that's going on inside of them is helpful.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Who is your, sort of staying on track, off track here, who is your, do you have like an ideal teen? Who normally seeks you out?
Oh,
or who do you seek out? Like who in your mind would you like to coach?
Oh.
Is it just any teen that thinks that they need that outside voice, that outside perspective, you're there for it? Or is there certain things that you look for in potential clients?
Yeah. So it's usually obviously the parents that find me, and so there's a couple. Okay. So the way I work is through, our thoughts create our feelings create our behaviors create our results in life. And then the results go back and feed into our thoughts. So it's this loop that we have. And so some parents come to me because of the behaviors that their kids are doing. They notice they're slacking off in school, they're skipping class, they're maybe using some drugs, maybe they're self-harming, they're noticing some depression tendencies. Maybe they're noticing some anxious tendencies. And so they're really focused in on the behaviors. The other thing they might focus in on is the feelings, like, oh, I'm really noticing my teenager sad a lot, or they're anxious a lot. And so, I mean, honestly, I kind of cover a wide spectrum of, they can come to me in really bad shape. And personally, not that that's what I want for them, but that's what I prefer, because then it's so fun to see the transformation.
Right.
That it's a drastic difference. It's like, you are not the same person that you were when you first started with me. And that is something to celebrate. Whereas the ones who aren't in such bad shape, it's great and it's fun and I love it and it's enjoyable, but you don't notice that drastic difference. And so it's just kind of a little bit personally more satisfying to see that extreme change.
Yeah. So I have, to give people some context, there's a very specific reason I invited you onto the show today.
Okay.
And as I told you, one of my coworkers, he says I have the gift of gab. He's like, I don't know what it is about you, David, but people just trust you with like crazy things. And so I was at the gym a couple months ago, and I was at the squat rack, and there is a post out there on YouTube where I made a 1 minute short about why I don't talk to my father anymore. And a teen in the gym comes up to me, and he like waved at me. So I take my headphones out and I go, "What's up, man?" And without saying anything, he doesn't say, I'm assuming he saw that clip because his comment was so specific. And he just says, and I've never met this guy before. And he says, you know what's crazy is the monster in your family was your dad. The monster in my family is my mom. And he went on to tell me, we worked out together several times. And over the course of getting to know this guy, I found out that he's bi, and he's been made fun of a lot in school for having a boyfriend, for how he dresses, for how he acts, for how he talks. He also says that his mom is very abusive with alcohol. He has a couple siblings. One of them right now is in rehab because she is dealing with anorexia. And he also, about a year ago, was cutting himself. And he said when he told me that, he's like, I don't even know why I told you that. No one knows that about me.
Wow.
But he's like, I feel like I can trust you. And so this individual is only one example, but as I've been in Austin for about 14 months now, and I've got to know all these teens and the things that they're depressed about and excited about and anxious about, I just thought I have to do an episode where we can provide some tools for them, because they are I mean, it was messy when I was a kid, but for some reason, I don't know. Let me start with this question. Okay. From your perspective, do you feel like being a teenager now is harder than it was when you and me were teens, or is it just different than when you and me were teens?
It's a million times harder.
Why so?
Social media, phones.
How do you feel about social media? Obviously, it's not going anywhere, so we can't say get rid of it. But what are your thoughts around it?
Right. Well, that's the thing. We have to give our tools. We have to be mentors for these teenagers and kind of explain how it works. And so I'm not anti-social media by any means. There are great things about it.
Yep.
I'm actually currently planning my 30-year high school reunion with social media.
And it's how we're growing our shows.
It's how we, right? It helps with business. It helps with connections. It helps with old connections. It helps with new connections, right? It's the dangerous parts are the social comparison. And that's what teenagers are most likely to do. And the self-judgment and the self-loathing when they don't get enough likes, or they don't get enough shares or enough views or enough clicks or whatever they're looking for. They literally decide how they feel about themselves based off of that. And then they're also comparing themselves to others and say, oh, well, I didn't go to that party Saturday. When I was growing up, I knew if a party was going on that I wasn't invited, but and it's not getting rubbed in my face. I'm not seeing all the pictures. I'm not seeing everybody have fun. Like, you don't get that extra added, like, it's kind of like adding salt to the wound. Like, it's insult to injury if, you're not at something, but yet, and that's what, teenagers are notorious for, adults too, but feeling that FOMO. And that sense of exclusion, and that sense of, I'm not good enough to get invited to that party, or why wasn't I invited, or things like that.
I went on the social media side of things, and I think this also plays into fitness. The question, and then I'm going to give a little bit of context, and I'll re-ask the question, is I was curious what you think about teens in the fitness industry, because there's one side of it where when I was a teenager, we lived outdoors. We didn't have cell phone. Well, my mom had a cell phone. It was one of those big blocks, and it had like the antenna that you had to pull up.
And that was just for emergencies too.
Right,
like, you didn't even chat on it or anything.
Not really. Yeah. But we lived outdoors. The gym was a second thought to us. And now I think I mentioned to you when we were on the phone that my gym, there's teens all over the place.
Yeah.
And so there's one side of me where I think this is awesome. Good for you guys. You're super strong. You're super physically healthy.
Yeah. But
then on the mental side of things, I think is the fitness industry / social media, and I'm not bashing the fitness industry. Everyone should work out. I'm a huge advocate. Yeah. But then there's the mental side of it, of we're comparing ourselves to everyone. We're comparing that's in the same gym.
Yeah.
But then as a step further, we're comparing ourselves to everyone we see on the phone. And so while teens may be physically healthy, how do we encourage them to be healthy? Not even just teens, humans. How do you want to be healthy, both physically and mentally? Because I feel like mentally we're just flogging ourselves for not having the six-pack, for not having the butt, for not having the arms, like whatever the thing is. We're just it seems like it's, like I said, it's a physically healthy place, but a really mentally unhealthy place where a lot of the teens are at. Do you sort of see that specifically in the fitness side of things, or what are your thoughts around
completely. I completely agree. And the funny thing is, it was girls that people thought had the body dysmorphia, where they're the self-conscious ones. It's always girls that are known to have the eating disorders, all those things. But it is so prevalent in boys.
Yep.
That boys are obsessed with this. In fact, my own boys, and I'm not saying they're on the unhealthy side, but I do worry. I I honestly feel like it's borderline. Like, is this an obsession that you're obsessed with building these muscles, that you're obsessed with looking good, right? It's like there comes a time where you want to be healthy. And my boys are both athletes. They want to be great athletes. They want to be strong. But at what point are you obsessing and where that's all you're thinking about? It's compulsive. Or even my son, he won't even eat sugar, which, there's something cool about that. Like, right?
Yeah.
I like that here's not just, because it's not even good for your brain. It's not good for your, academics to have a lot of sugar. It's not good for your sleep. It's not good for anything. But he is so strict with himself. And so part of that is, he feels like inspired to be like Tom Brady, like hardcore, like the protein shakes and this, and his whole diet is very regimented. But I do think it's an issue, what you're saying, like about these unhealthy thoughts and the social comparison and not feeling good enough. And, I want to have a butt like that or this like that, right? That is not really a good thing to say. There's a saying that I have in the coaching world, which is, if you're going to compare to yourself and compare to your progress from yesterday. Are you better today than you were yesterday? And when you look at others, they say look to others for inspiration. So if we want to compare to ourselves, if we want to look at others, say, I would love to be like that. What do I need to do to get that way? But I'm not going to feel bad that I'm not at that level yet. It's just going to inspire me.
Yeah.
Yeah,
it's very true. I think it's hard to get. It's easy to say,
yeah.
right? It's so easy for you and me to say, especially because we have a little bit more life experience and we've hopefully grown up. Not grown up, that's a bad way to say it. But I think with life comes experience and knowledge. And so do you, obviously without giving specifics, do you have any clients that you feel that when they came to you, comparison was one of their dark places, and after a couple of months or a couple of years of working with you, they got to a place where they were only able to compare themselves to themselves? And what did that process look like?
I don't think we're going to ever get rid of social comparison at all, no matter how much I coach them.
Yep.
We actually are hardwired. So I like to explain that it's an evolutionary process, social comparison. So if we somehow didn't fit into the pack or the caveman days, we were exiled from the tribe or the pack or whatever you want to call it. And then we would die because we didn't have food, we didn't have water, we didn't have resources. And so we're literally hardwired to assimilate to those around us and be like others. That's why the brands are so important. All the girls they literally look all alike because they all wear the same things, and the boys, they all kind of have their style, and the brands are so important.
Young LA.
Oh, exactly.
It's everywhere.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. And so I hear some complaints from parents about, why do I have to spend this money on my kid? And I don't want to do this. And I'm like, well, you don't, but I explained to you why your child is wanting that. Because they're just trying to fit in, and we're hardwired to want to fit in so we don't feel excluded. And so it's like, is that really a bad motive? No, that's not a bad motive. That's a natural human instinct and motive. So I'm sorry, I kind of forgot what the question was.
Yeah, no, don't be sorry at all. The question was originally, how do you coach someone to not compare themselves to others? And then you sort of started talking about how it's our tribal instinct. It's hardwired within us.
Yeah. Well, what I would do though to try to counteract that to the best of my ability with a client is to build themselves up to really like who they are, to love who they are, and to be happy with who they are. And so the more you feel strong on the inside, the less you have a need to compare to others. It's like, who cares what they're doing, right? You somehow you just release the energy. And so I'm not sure I can give necessarily a specific method,
right,
but it's just the work that we do over time. It kind of just happens naturally, actually. Yeah.
Yeah. Going back to the one team that I was referencing earlier, one thing that I've noticed that he does is after every story that he's told me, he'll end it by saying, but it's just life. It's all good, whatever. So, and he'll tell me this crazy story about how his mom got drunk and then said some crazy things to him and then drove off while drunk. And and then he's like, but that's life. It's whatever. Have you seen that type of hate behavior? And when teens, or really anyone, it's anyone could do it, right? Me, you, when people go through a situation that is, from the outsider's opinion, I just have so much empathy and I want to be like, dude, that sucks. Like, how can I be here for you? But then they end the story with, but that's life, whatever. What do you think about that sort of shrugging off of something that's not, it's not whatever. Like, obviously it's significant to you because you're you're telling me about it, but you just wrote it off as if it's nothing.
I think that's a defense mechanism, unfortunately. I don't think he really has that crazy awesome of a mindset in life. There's no way you really could about that situation when your own family or specifically your parent is doing a very unhealthy behavior that's very obvious, like driving drunk.
Yeah.
I think probably deep down that is very painful for him. He's just trying to learn how to cope with that and deal with that, and maybe that's his way of doing it right now. But it's probably going to affect him for quite a while. Like, he's probably going to need some support or need some help in some way. Maybe you're that person for him, as being a listening ear. And kind of sometimes you just want to be with someone. It's kind of, actually, on my podcast, I just had a grief expert come in last week, and she was talking about loss, and she had 4 miscarriages, and then she also lost her health. She had cancer. And so she said sometimes the best thing you can do is they're not always the right words to say. Like, what do you say to somebody who just lost a baby or their spouse or somebody? There's no words that can fix that, but just being present with them and even saying the words like, I want to be with you. I want to be here for you. We are with you right now. We're supporting you. Kind of just like that human collective, like, support is sometimes like the most healing thing for somebody.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree, because a lot of the things that he tells me, or that I have 3 or 4 individuals in mind, I often don't have any advice to give them. And I've had to tell myself, like, that's okay. You can just listen, because to your point, what if they're not talking to anybody else? And what if I'm just the first person who does just quiets and listens? To your point about earlier, where, you don't always need to give your kids advice. You don't always need to have a rebuttal or an answer.
Totally.
Sometimes they just need all of us, me included, you just need a place where you can go vent. And I'm not even necessarily looking for a solution. I just need somewhere where I can go, and I know I'm not going to be judged for whatever is upsetting me.
Yeah. And I call that, I actually teach that in my course as well, like just active listening skills. So there's empathetic listening. And so what that looks like is saying something like, I can understand why you must be feeling sad, frustrated, hurt, overwhelmed, scared. That makes sense because, X, Y, and Z, A, B, and C, so X, Y, and Z, right? So you're kind of just understanding the feeling, and naming the feeling is so helpful. Teenagers have a hard time, even adults do, recognizing what it is that they're really feeling. They might think that they're feeling mad, but anger is actually just a higher level of sadness. It's a more energetic level of sadness, and so deep down they probably do feel sad. And so sometimes just naming the feeling, then they're like, yes, that's what I feel. And they provide some relief. They say you have to name it to tame it.
I don't mean to laugh, but that's just a cute phrase I've never heard before. I love it.
Yeah. Name it to tame it. So name that emotion, and then it kind of just helps like release some of the power of it. It kind of lets it go through your system. You kind of have to metabolize your emotions, and so that kind of helps it when you just can give a word, but then for you to even see them more and say, I see you. I have this whole, it's called connected mindset for parenting. It's I see you, I hear you, I feel you, I love you, I support you.
I see you, I hear you, I feel you, I love you, I support you.
Yeah.
Yeah, I want those 5 things. I want to be seen, heard, loved, felt. What is it? I see you, I hear you, I love you.
See, hear, feel, love, support.
Support.
Yeah.
Yeah, we all need that. We all want those 5 things.
Yeah. And so it's like, if you can provide that for those kids that you're talking about at the gym, where you don't have to have some master plan of how to fix their life,
right?
But to just say, I see you, I see your frustration, I see your pain, I hear you, I understand that. And that makes sense. And anyone in your position would feel that, because that's normal and that's human that you're having that response.
Yeah. Do you think that teens, this one, I don't know if it would come up in a coaching session. Do you feel like teens are good at giving compliments? Do you think they get a lot of compliments? And the reason I ask this is because there's a guy in the gym a couple weeks ago, and he was spending like a solid 20 seconds checking out his shoulder. And so I took my headphone out, and I was like, dude, your shoulders look great. And the way he reacted, he lit up like these LED lights, almost as if he had maybe he gets compliments all the time, but since it's coming from a stranger, I don't know. But it got me to thinking, the way he lit up. I thought, I wonder if teens, I wonder if they give each other compliments very often, because there's this aspect of like we were talking about, where from what I have observed, all these things I'm saying are based off the people I see at my gym. I'm not projecting my thoughts on all teams throughout the globe, but it seems like they are sort of hyper focused on themselves and their bodies and their growth, and I see them checking themselves out in the mirror in the locker room, and it did make me wonder if we have gotten bad at complimenting other people, but also if there could be this like fear of complimenting because like, oh, they might think I'm gay, or like, again, this is me overanalyzing, similar to the client you were talking about. I just like to think, I'm probably taking away way too much from that one interaction of telling him his shoulders look good and he lit up, but it did just make my mind go down this rabbit hole of, I wonder if maybe not complimenting is the right word, but I wonder if we have a culture of, do we encourage each other very often? Do we support each other very often? Are these teams, what are their friendships like? Do they help each other? Do they support each other? Do they trust their friends? But I'm the one rambling now, but what are your thoughts?
Well, first of all, if I had to guess about that, I would say getting a compliment from a stranger is like gold. And I know this because I get compliments from strangers every once in a while. I'm like, oh my gosh, that just made my day. Literally, I'll tell someone, that just made my day.
Yeah.
I had some random dude, I was in a juice store, and he goes, you look like a badass.
That's such a great compliment.
Oh,
go tell someone that today. That's great.
I'm like, I love you. I don't even know you. It was so nice to hear that. And then just a random dude the other day is like, I like your hat. And I was like, thanks. Like, it was just nice, to get, it's that notice. I see you, I hear you, I feel, right? It's just to get noticed by someone and kind of, if that is his goal to like have those good muscles and then have a random stranger comment on it, it probably truly did make his day. But as far as teenagers, I know girls are pretty good about complimenting each other. I'm not sure if it's done with the most genuine of intentions. I think a lot of times it's just to kind of like build up points and so that you'll reciprocate a compliment back. It might be a little bit self-serving. Boys, I've never really seen a teenage boy give another teenage boy a compliment. So I don't know if that even exists in this world. It's hard for me to say. I can't really say about that.
Yeah. One thing that did, it just like warmed my heart for one reason or another, but I was working out and there's a kid at the far end of the gym, like opposite, like as far away from the front doors as you could get. And in the mirror, I saw him running behind me. And so when anyone, you don't often see just people running in public, so I think it would catch anyone's attention. But I turned around to see what he was running at, and he ran up to whoever was walking in the front door and gave that other dude a huge hug. Oh. And so I am assuming it was probably like a friend who he hadn't seen in a while. Whatever it was though, I was like, that made my day of just seeing like these two friends reconnect, give each other a hug, huge smile on their faces, was so excited to see him, and he literally sprinted through the gym. It made my day. It was awesome.
That's very heartwarming to hear.
Yeah. So there is a guest that came on a couple months ago, and he said he made a generic statement about how teen suicide is at a higher rate than ever. And after the episode, as I was editing it and getting ready to release it, I wanted to fact check him on that statement. I do that with everyone. It's not like I did or didn't believe him, but essentially what I found is that the CDC in 2019 reported that for every 100,000 kids between the ages of 10 and 19, 8.9 of them took their own life. And in the same article, fast forward to 2021, they said that unfortunately that number of kids rose. And in 2021, kids between the ages of 10 through 19, for every 100,000, it rose from 8.9 to 12.8 in just that 2 years. I thought that's a huge jump. That 3 more for every 100,000. And I know this is a tough topic. It's something that you've experienced in your own life. Why? So the CDC issues the numbers, but they didn't talk in that specific article. They didn't talk a lot about why. What are your thoughts? Why do you think that number is going up?
Yeah, I do have to add to the statistics. So like I said, I wasn't great at finance and numbers in business school, but the one stat I do know is according to the CDC, in 2023, a report was released about teenage girls, and they found 1 in 3 girls have had thoughts of suicide. 1 in 3.
That's a lot.
That is a lot.
That's a ton.
Yeah. So that's crazy. So you're saying why? It really is think about it. Okay, so let me give you... There's 3 things. So there's once, this technology came along. This didn't exist when we grew up, right? And so the question we have to ask ourselves is, what has changed? And the answer is the technology. And so there's 3 things that have been found in research that are kind of contributing to that, which is access. So we have access, kids have access to things on the internet that we would have had to look it up in the encyclopedia. We would have had to ask a parent. We would have to go to the library.
Right.
To get information. Like, how do you get information? How do you see images, right? Or, if we want to be dark, like you go to a weird magazine store and you find, it's like
Yep.
the media. And so it's like access, isolation. So kids are isolating more than they ever did before because especially during COVID, they take their phones and they go in their rooms. And that's what happened because when online school started happening, if you're in a family in your house and you have multiple kids, they're all on class simultaneously. They're all in their bedrooms. So isolation. And then the third thing is authority. So there has been a shift in authority, which is, like I said, when we were growing up, if we were little and we didn't understand something, we'd say, hey, Mom, how does the sun, blah, blah, and actually, my kid one time did ask me, Mom, where do clouds come from? And I was like, oh, geez, how do
Let's look it up. Get the phone out.
Yeah, like, I know it's like evaporated water, blah, blah, but I don't know. So, and so authority. And so the thing is they found is that there's a shift in authority. So no longer is that our parent is our authority, but from a very young age, kids are on YouTube, kids are on TikTok, kids are on other types of social media where they are now watching other adults or kids do things. And that becomes their new source of authority. That becomes their new source for what is appropriate behavior. All those extreme challenges where some of the things can be dangerous. I mean, do you know the ones I'm talking about? Like the ice dumping over the head is like a challenge, or
yes, I do remember that
different
one.
kind of daredevil things. And so now, or even just behaviorally. So I have a story where on the last day of school several years ago at my kids' middle school, all the kids driving away on the school bus gave the teachers, because they're out there waving, it's the last day of school, saying happy summer. And the kids are all giving the middle finger to the teachers. We wouldn't have done that growing up because we wouldn't have thought that to be even an idea in the first place. I'm not saying there wouldn't have been 1 kid or 2 kids.
Right.
But to have a whole school bus, right, of kids, and I'm not saying it was 100%, but it was apparently a large...
Most of them.
Yeah. And it's like, what about them made them think that that's okay? And it's like, because they're seeing things like that on social media. So they're mimicking behavior. And so they always say the way that kids learn is through modeling. And so they model behavior. They say, do as I say, not as I do. And it's really the opposite. They do what you do. So if they see other people online doing things, they mimic that behavior.
So, sorry, I have like 3 or 4 different thoughts.
Yeah.
The middle finger one is funny because I imagine that in any industry, like, of all the cops out there, like, there's going to be 1 or 2 bad ones. Of all the teachers out there, there's going to be 1 or 2 bad ones. Of all the podcasters out there, there's always like the rotten apple, right? But that, to me, the middle finger one, with all the kids, it's like, it's such a funny behavior because it's like most of those teachers are probably teachers because they want it to be. They want to help those teens figure out their career and their life, and they have good intentions, and maybe they have moments of weakness. But in the school year, by just saying F you to all of you, was that here in Austin or where?
Yeah.
Do you know, were any of those kids, do you know any of them? Whether it was your kids, clients, or was it something you read?
No, it was at my kids' school. I was told this by the teachers there because actually what I did to kind of help make sure I have the full picture of what my clients experience is I actually became a substitute teacher for a little bit of time because I wanted to go in the schools. I was in the high school. I was in the middle school. I wanted to see what are these kids' days like? What is different about from when I went to school? And so I wanted to literally be there. So I got to know some of the teachers and I got to know what it's like to be a teacher in this day and age. I have to tell you, it's completely different because the kids just struggle so much more to emotionally regulate, to calm themselves down, to do appropriate behavior, to do the assignment. I mean, I saw my kids, again, I was a sub, but they were like throwing their homework on the floor. I'm like, dudes, you're going to get a grade for that. Like, if you don't turn that in, they're like, we don't care. I'm like, really? There's something about there's a disconnect with like kind of the cause and effect. And I get, middle school is like the hardest to teach that to them.
Yeah.
But I think this was still like honestly recovering from COVID, where kids just got so overwhelmed and stressed and burned out with the online work, so that when they returned, they had a hard time sitting in a classroom. They were used to being in their homes, and so I think that was part of the problem. But also, even now, I do see a massive change in behavior compared to 30 years ago.
Yeah. Real quick, I know what I want to ask you next,
Okay.
but out of respecting your time, it's 1:30 right now. Is there a specific time we want to wrap
I'm
up by?
good. Yeah,
Okay,
I'm
cool. So going off that, there is one guy at my gym who is a sophomore right now in high school, I believe, and he went back to school whenever the schools opened back up. I don't recall when, but then he found out there is an online program, and so he's doing that now, and he loves it because he can complete his entire school day in about an hour. But he was telling me that he feels like he really misses the social aspect. He's like, I don't see my friends, so like positives. I get to sleep in. What takes 7 hours, give or take, is now taking me 1. He doesn't like dealing with teachers, but he basically sleeps in, does his hour of school, goes to the gym, goes back home, plays video games until 2 a.m. in the morning, and then sleeps. And so I told him, I was like, well, if you're missing your friends and your social aspect, why not just go back to school? And he said, because then I have to deal with the teachers and I have to be at school for 8 hours. I'd rather. And so he's sort of walking this line of like, which is the lesser of two evils? Do I want the social interactions with my colleagues, or do I want the 1 hour of schooling? But is there a lot of kids that are still doing online school, or what are your thoughts sort of about that particular scenario?
I don't think that there's a ton doing online, but I think there's a lot that want to do that.
Is it for the same reason we can just get it over with, so to speak, in an hour or two?
Yeah. Or I have one client actually who is very passionate about theater, and so she takes a lot of theater, choir, dance, anything that has to do with production, outside classes. And it's very time consuming. And so she's like, I could do my school in an hour and then still be able to do all my theater stuff that I'm passionate about and not be so burned out and drained and exhausted, because she's kind of gets very little sleep. She's running because she does go to school. Her parents wouldn't allow her to do the online school. But if I have to comment about that kid, I would say I personally believe he's missing out on some important developmental milestones of being in school. There's something about being forced to be doing something that you don't enjoy that is part of growing up that kind of creates maturity in an adult, because someday he'll have a boss. Yep. And if he doesn't like sitting in an office, I mean, most people don't really work in the office anymore, but if he doesn't like doing 8 hours of work, or he doesn't like taking orders, or if he's not happy with, and he doesn't get to work out and do his video games, there's going to be a problem in his life. He's going to be like, I'm so unhappy. I'm so miserable. It's like, well, that's because you weren't trained to realize that part of growing up in life is sometimes doing things we don't want to do.
Yeah. And that's when I heard someone say that's when discipline comes into effect. If you're doing things based off of, oh, I'm in the mood to do it, you're often going to find yourself not doing those things. But discipline is when I'm not in the mood to do this. Maybe I wasn't in the mood to meet you today. No, I've been looking forward to this all week. So, but discipline is when, like, if I'm not in the mood to podcast, I power through anyways, because we set this appointment,
right?
And I'm going to keep my word,
right?
And I'm not going to cancel on you simply because I'm not in the mood.
Yeah.
But David, several years ago, I have flaked on things in the past, whether I wasn't in the mood, in both my personal life, my professional life. And so, discipline is one of those things. I feel like you just get through repetitions of doing it over and over again. But I told him, I was like, dude, I feel like you should just go back to school. Like, yes, it's a pain in the ass, but you said it out loud. You miss your friends.
Yeah.
And that seems so much more valuable is being able to see them in between classes and at lunchtime and after school than it does in getting everything done in 1 hour. But
there's something I kind of really feel the need to comment on. Is it's weird to me how so many teenagers just really hate their teachers. And I'm like, they can't all be bad, but there's something in the culture where, and I remember growing up, there was one or two I didn't like, but I had one teacher that I loved, my government, and he taught me like law. He was the best teacher, and I loved him. And I'm not saying this is true for all kids, but it's like somehow they need to learn to tolerate an adult or a personality type that is not so comfortable to them. It's like, well, just deal with it, toughen up. Like I feel like they need to suck it up a little bit. I feel like they're being a little weak on that, and being blunt. I just think that they are. It's like, well, the thing is, I would be really supportive of that kid if he had some big career ambition. And so he spent the rest of his 10 hours a day not playing video games, but starting a nonprofit, starting let's save the plastic out of our oceans. Let's do this. Let's do that. If he was driven, I'd be like, well, hell yeah, you should only be in school 1 hour a day because you're being so productive doing these other things. And you're not avoiding school because you don't like the teachers. You're avoiding school because you need the time so you can pursue your mission.
Yeah. That makes me think of, for anyone that wants to go back, if this happens to be your first time tuning in to DSNSB, there's a guy that I had on named Cole Nevins, and he's 19 right now, which means in 2020 he would have been 16. But when the pandemic hit, he's a sports blogger, and in the middle of the pandemic, he put 163 kids to work and started like a sports blogging organization, cool, which he is now making money off of, and it's evolved. Obviously, I feel like 2020 was a very unique year. 21 was a unique year. 22 was a unique year. So his business phenom has evolved over and over and over again. But it was so cool having him on the podcast because he started his career at 8 years old, and at 16 years old, he was smart enough to pivot and be like, all right, so how do we do this digitally, and how do I utilize teenagers all over the US? Yeah. It was a wild story. So if there's any teens who are looking for some inspiration, go look at Cole's episode because he was fantastic. But switching gears here a little bit, one thing that you put down on the form that you filled out and that I wanted to bring up is bullying. Bullying? Bullying. Yeah, just bullying. One syllable.
Yeah.
Yeah. The young individual I referenced a little bit ago, there is a time when I was in the locker room. I was sitting in the sauna. I love my sauna time. It's the highlight of my day. And I came out of the sauna, and there was two guys in the locker room. It's so funny to say this out loud because I'm so removed from high school, right? I haven't been in high school for years. But they were talking, they were literally making fun of this guy, not to his face, but they were talking about how he's so gay and how he dresses so weird and he's such a FAG. I don't even like saying it out loud. And I had this moment of just like, I knew exactly who they were talking about because they were referencing some very specific things. And I was like, no shit, they're talking about my friend. And it hurt. When I got in my car and started driving home, I feel like I'm a very empathetic person. I feel like we all have a superpower, maybe 2 or 3 or 4. Call them something else, a superpower, an intuition. But for me, I was also made fun of in high school. And so as I was driving home, I was in tears because I thought, what if he had walked in the locker room in that moment and he heard that? But it made me realize, I was like, shit, I sort of forgot as an adult that, yeah, in high school, we made fun of each other. And it's apparently still a thing. What are your thoughts on this topic? And is it pretty prevalent within teens, at least the ones that you've talked to and from your exposure?
Well, there's a total difference between making fun of each other in good fun. You know, guys kind of love to
We do it all the time.
Yeah. It's kind of like y'all's love language, you know? And that's endearing. Because it's understood that this is guy code for we like each other because we're giving each other a hard time. That is a completely different ball of wax than bullying. Bullying is designed to intimidate, to scare, to make feel worse or less about yourself. The intent behind it is completely different.
So to those that are, let's say you could have had, let's say it was not in the locker room. Let's say you were, on campus picking up your kids, and you were in that moment where you heard 2 teens making fun of another one, and then let's say that through one way, shape, or form, their parents got a hold of you, and all of a sudden, this kid is now being coached by you. So you have a moment to talk to the bully. What would you want to know about them? What would you ask? What would you coach them? What would if you had this insight to their life, or maybe they even told you, they were like, Laura, I make fun of people all the time. I do it because I'm peer pressured, or I don't even know why I do it, but I just find that I'm constantly talking shit about other students. How would you coach them, and what would that conversation look like?
Well, first of all, the idea behind a bully is that hurt people hurt people. So they are actually, in a way, and I hate to say this because bullies suck, but they're actually a victim as well.
Right.
There's something in their life that has happened that has caused them so much pain that they have to push that off onto somebody else and make someone else feel pain because it kind of like dulls or numbs their pain. So the question is, how would I coach them? Well, it would be kind of somewhat similar to the same process that I go through with anybody else, which is, what do you like about yourself? Whenever I ask that question to a teenager, it is crazy. They're like, I don't know. It's crazy. They have a hard time really answering that question. And so that's just like, let's build up what you like about you. I'm not a therapist, I'm a coach.
Right.
So I'm not going to dwell a lot of times on, oh, tell me about what happened when you were 3 years old and what happened when you're 8 and why did your parents, we don't spend a lot of time on that. I do ask them, is there something in your life that you can remember that made you feel this way? Or is there a specific incident that I do have a client who, and this is veering off, but it's answering the question. She has a lot of OCD symptoms. She has to do things repetitively 3 times before she leaves the house. And we've uncovered in our work, it's because her dad is a firefighter. And so when she was little, she was always worried whenever he left the house that he wouldn't be safe, that something would happen to him. And so over time, that kind of those behaviors has become that she felt like she needed to control in some way that everybody in her life is going to be safe if she does these 3 things. And so it's not a healthiest way. So we're trying to work our way through that. But to get back to the question is, I would coach them to also take responsibility. Right? Like even though you are in pain and you are feeling the need to kind of transmute that onto someone else, you need to take responsibility and ownership for what you've done. And you need to learn empathy. Like you just said, you're a very empathetic person. So what is it like to see that person suffering? What is it like to see them sad? Or, can you imagine what it would be like when they have to go home and, if they had bruises, like let's say it's a physical bullying, like how humiliating is that for their parents to have to see and for that child to have to explain that to their parents? Usually it's invisible. It's usually more like cyberbullying or verbal bullying. And so it's like, let's imagine what it feels like. How would it feel like for you if someone said A, B, and C? And I have a feeling they'd be like, that wouldn't bother me, right? But it's like, well, what would something that would bother you? If they're vulnerable enough, if they're able to access that, they can probably think of something. Even if they want to admit it out loud to me, they could think of it inside their head. Okay, what would it be like if someone said that to you every single day? How would you feel? Not so good. Right? Well, why are you doing that to somebody else? Well, I already know the answers, right? But I'm leading them down the path, the thought process, so they can connect. Like I said, kids have a hard time with the cause and effect. Like what you're doing and what you're creating is they don't see. Even though kids say it's so silly, they're like, oh, if I go to bed earlier, I won't feel so tired. Duh. But they have a hard time like making that connection. So anyway, I would really guide them through kind of a healing process of let's get to know and like yourself better and feel better about yourself so you don't feel the need to make somebody feel bad.
Yeah. Did you happen to know of the book The Gift of Fear by Gavin D. Becker?
I don't think I do.
So he is the founder of a security company that essentially protects everyone from the Secret Service hires them. So they're sometimes protecting the president, a lot of actors, actresses, musicians, NHL football, those high level people who when they go in public. I have heard this
book. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So the book is about 50% talking about how to leverage your fear and your intuition to work for you. And then the other 50% of the book is a case study of clients that they had who had stalkers, kidnappers who murdered someone in their family, and how the common denominator, going back to your point about hurt people, the way he ended the book, I think it was like literally the last page or the second to last page, his takeaway was that with every single one of these murderers, stalkers, kidnappers, the common factor that all of them had was they grew up in horrendous homes. And if these parents had somehow been able to find some love and compassion, if these parents had been able to love them, see them, hear them, he sort of, I think it was sort of like a 50% joke, but 100% also dead serious. If parents could love their kids, would we actually be able to eliminate murderers, stalkers, kidnappers? And it was just a wild proposal that had me sort of reeling for a few seconds about, damn, hurt people. And I did love that on your Instagram page, you offered so much advice for parents because like you said, it's not easy. whether you're a single parent or even as two parents, raising 4 kids. Oh my God, 4 human beings. You're in charge of 4 human beings, Laura. Don't
no pressure.
This up. No pressure at all. Yeah, but what are your thoughts about Gavin's proposal about?
I completely agree. And so, and that's why I have become a parent coach. Originally, my vision was just to help teenagers. But I found immediately that people would say, hey, can you fix my teenager? They don't say that words, but that's what they mean. Hey, here you go. They don't actually say, "Can you fix it?" But
right.
But they're like, "Here you go. There's a problem," and even you can hear like the way they're describing it. He does this. He does that, and it's very blamey, the feeling about their teenager, like as if it's all their problems. And I really want the parents to start taking some responsibility. And so that's when I realized that I'm like, "Ooh, I'm really doing a disservice to the community if I only focus on teenagers." I really think that a lot of parents are suffering in their own way, and they need help, and they need coaching, and they need like support on how to parent their teenagers. And and that's the thing, that's what really generational trauma is. It gets passed down from generation to generation. And so it's like if they're a parent that creates a stalker or a murderer or whatever, their grandparents probably had something going on, right? It gets passed down. And so yes, I 100% agree that bullying would be stopped if it starts in the home, right? So that's what the research has found, is that bullies, they're probably either bullied by a sibling or a parent, and that's what causes them to do that at school.
Yeah. It's funny because yes, it was a weird moment on the podcast where I had someone on who was I want to say like the quarterback of his football team, and he had and one of the people that made fun of me in high school was a lot of the football players, and he was talking about how one of the biggest changes he saw in his own life was that he had a potential love interest who told him that he was too skinny, and in turn he saw himself becoming just a complete jerk while he was in high school to other kids because of the comment that she had made to him, and it just made him so mad. His way of like dealing was to make fun of other kids. Obviously, I don't know if that's what the person I thought of in high school did to me, but even it was a weird revelation 18 years later of like, shit, that individual, I wonder if I bumped into him on the street today and I could talk with him for a few minutes, what was going on in his life. Because so often, I think especially as a teen, because we're young and we don't know what else to do, is to just play the victim mentality and woe is me and that guy's a jerk. But I did wonder like what had happened to him before he made fun of me.
Right. There had to be something. You don't just come out into this world and be like, I'm going to be a bully.
Right. I don't think that's said nobody ever. Exactly.
That's nobody's goal or dream or vision. It's almost like they're resorting to this like very unhealthy behavior because they don't know what else to do with those feelings. So
I'm going to give you one very specific situation, and then I have one more generic one for parents. But I went home to California for Christmas, have a teen in my life who is talking to me about how he wants to get out of his parents' house specifically because he experimented with drinking. No shocker here, peer pressure. Even he said it. He was like, if my friends weren't doing it, I wouldn't have done it. But I did drink. I got drunk. I drove home blackout drunk, don't remember a thing, stumbled into the house, fell into bed. And so he woke up his parents, and they had they saw him and they helped him get into bed. And then they looked at the cameras and they smelled the alcohol in his breath, and they could tell by the way he was acting like, holy cow, like, thank God he got home safe.
Yeah.
So those parents had, this was at midnight or whatever time it was, but essentially they had about, a several hour period where they were able to pause and reflect on like, how are we going to react to this? Before I go on to tell you what they did do, if that's to say, God forbid, that was your kid, in that 8-hour period, what do you think you would have reflected on, and how do you think you would have reacted, since you did have that time where, because sometimes when we find out something, it's like you got to react in the moment, right?
Yeah.
But in this case, your kid is literally blacked out, so like you can't do anything.
Right.
So how do you process that, and how do you think you would react? How would you tackle that conversation?
Yeah, I think, they say you need to get more curious and less judgmental, and I think it's, maybe we should settle in that one for a minute.
Whew.
Yeah. create curiosity, like, and not judge. So judgment, it would be making statements like, I can't believe you did that. Oh my God, you're so stupid, blah, blah, right? Like some negative comments would be judgmental. Curiosity would be like, I'm just really curious, what caused you to, get to the point, or first of all, what caused you to try to, experiment with alcohol tonight? Were you feeling pressured by teenagers? What was it like for you? Did it make you, feel sick when you started? Did you notice anything in your body? Just asking questions and to just allow them to then share and open up without kind of like attacking them.
I love that. I love that as a starting point. Curiosity instead of so there's a phrase that I use from a business perspective that's very similar. That's if you're dealing with employees or coworkers or even your managers, your leaders, one thing that I've always tried to remind myself is seek to understand before being understood.
Yeah.
And it's very but I like how you worded yours even more. Is look to be curious instead of judgmental. So what the parents ended up doing was they took away his car restrictions, and he does have a part-time job, so he has to walk to work every day, and it's a 1 hour walk to there and a 1 hour walk back. So now he's walking 2 hours a day, 3 to 5 times per week. But additionally, the reason he wants to move out, that he was telling me, he was like, David, I'm not even drinking anymore. I haven't done it again since then. I didn't have any fun. I'm not gonna do it again. And I guess I didn't even know this was a thing. I don't know if you'll know about this, but I guess there's some sort of prescription pill you can take where you take it once a day, and if you do consume alcohol, it immediately makes you puke. So I didn't realize there is this like anti-drinking pill that you can take. Yeah. But they were telling him that they're thinking about getting this prescription for him and having him take this pill, and he's like, dude, I'm not taking this shit. And his mom is active in AA, and so he's like, David, she thinks I'm her, and I'm not. Like, I did it once, and now they want me to start taking this pill. So I guess if you were to give any advice to both parents and the teens, teens, how should you be reacting to this? Parents, how should you be reacting to this? Now that you sort of know what did end up actually happening, what are your 2 cents to both the parents or the teen or both?
Yeah, that sounds very extreme. So it does sound like she's projecting her own fears onto her son. And, alcoholism is genetic. And so maybe that's what her fear is, that, if he does this once, he's going to do it again. It's going to ruin his life. Right. So she's acting out of fear. And I actually maybe I wrote a blog about it, about not parenting out of fear. And so asking yourselves, what are you really afraid of? And so what behaviors, how we talked about our thoughts create our feelings, and our feelings create our behaviors. And so it's like, is it really reasonable to make your child take a prescription pill?
Sorry.
Right?
I'm sorry. It's the way you said it. I was like, in full 1,000% transparency, when he told me this, I was like, oh my God. Like, that does seem a little extreme for your first time drunk. Like, what teen doesn't go out and experiment with alcohol?
Right.
We literally, 98% of us in the U.S. probably have that, maybe not the drinking and the driving part. That I think I did a good job at not judging him. Yeah. I was just like, dude, I'm so freaking glad you made it home okay. Please don't do that again. Yeah. But I do think, a lot of us experience. Sorry to interrupt you.
Yeah, no. Like, that is pretty off the charts, I would say. But it's from the teenager's perspective, or from the parent's perspective, you do have to walk back in time and remember what you did as a teenager. I think so many parents conveniently now are on their high horse, and we're like, well, these are our standards and our values and our morals and our family, and no child of ours is going to be drinking alcohol or doing this or da-da-da-da-da-da, right? It's like, well, did you do that? And they're like, yeah. Okay, right? You did that as a child, or teenager, right? So it's like, recognize that experimentation is part of being it's part of development. Risk-taking is part of normal development. In fact, I can talk about the brain science of that, where our limbic system grows, which is at the base of our neck, grows at a more rapid rate than the prefrontal cortex. Like I said, it doesn't fully develop till you're 26. And so That's why teenagers are more prone to extreme risk taking, because it lights up their emotional center of like, ooh, this is fun, this is exciting, social, the peer pressure. It's like all the emotions is what's driving the car, or driving the whatever, driving. They're driving.
Yep.
The emotions are driving, and the decision making, the rational part is just asleep. It's dormant. It falls asleep. And so to just understand that brain science is really important for parents, because also they have found that teenagers do take risks when they are amongst friends. If that kid were in the same, home alone, is he going to get blackout drunk when he's home alone? No, he's doing it because he's with friends, and it's because he's pressured, and it's because he's in the social, right?
Yeah.
And so, I mean, to me, that sounds completely unreasonable. I think that, he served a sentence. He did the 1 hour walk to and from work. I would say I would let him off the hook after a few weeks. Like, okay, you learn your lesson. We're not going to do this again. All right, let's restart the situation.
Yeah.
Reboot.
If you don't mind me putting you on the spot, have you thought about your own? How old is your oldest right now?
She's 15.
15.
Yeah.
So have you thought about your own kids, and whether it's today or 3 years from now, 5 years from now? Have you talked with them about experimenting with drinking? Or I know, like right now in the U.S., weed is, some states have legalized, some don't. I will, not to out anyone, but in Austin, I know a ton of people smoke weed, and it's pretty prevalent. Have you thought about that, kids, in your own moment? If one of them told you either, I did experiment with drinking that, or they probably wouldn't word it like that. Mom, no. I got drunk, I got wasted. How do you think you're going to react when that moment?
And we've talked about that. Like, what would that look like if you got really, really drunk? What are the dangers of that? What could have happened? I want her to really make that cause and effect connection, because I say, I need you to make good choices. I get it. It's totally normal to try that here and there but I'm very, very also cautious with, what I allow, as far as what type of environment she's in. And that's the thing, everybody apparently is having parties without the parents home. Okay, I have to remember, I went to lots of parties with no parents home.
Yep.
And so that's where these things are happening. And so I kind of want to know, where are you? Who are you going to be with? Who's driving? What time? Like she knows, she has a pretty early curfew. I really want my child to be safe. That's my job. That is my number one job, is to keep my child alive. Yep. Right? That's where I hate to say the word fail, because, tragically this does happen, where kids do die because of, something didn't go right.
Yeah.
And I feel like that is my top priority. My next top priority is, I can't my ex-husband is extremely strict. He won't really let her go anywhere. And I say, she's not Rapunzel. You can't lock her up in a tower and then release her when she's 21 years old. We have to allow her to go and to make these decisions on her own, to have this kind of awareness and understanding as to how would it feel if I drank too much. Ooh, I'd feel pretty bad. I'd be puking. I'd be passing out. I'd be hungover, right? It's like you almost want them to try it once or twice, and so they know it's bad. It doesn't feel good.
Yeah, I remember, as you were talking about how you're raising your own kids, when I was like 22 or 23, I threw this Halloween party, and with my family, we were raised, you never drink, you never do drugs, you will die if you. It was pretty extreme.
Instill the fear.
And so I'm like 22, and I'm throwing this party, not at my house. I had moved out, so me and my roommate were throwing this Halloween party, and my buddy Danny got dropped off by his mom, and I was like, "Was that your mom that just dropped you off?" Yeah. And he was like, "Yeah, she drops me off to all my parties. She knows I'm going to be drinking, and so she just drops me off and picks me up." And I thought, that's pretty badass.
Yeah.
Because like we said 5, 10, 15 minutes ago, I feel like most kids in the U.S. at some point you're going to drink, at some point you're going to get high. And I loved that instead of almost like living in denial of that, his mom was like, well, let's just make sure you get home safe, Lynn. And I'm just going to I'll be your Uber, essentially.
Yeah, I think that's great. I almost
worry. I feel butt coming.
Yeah,
Yep.
I almost worry that sends the signal of being really permissive about it. Like, yeah, totally, it's fine that you're drinking all the time, right? It's like we don't want to give the message that this is okay. We want to give the message it's okay to experiment, and you're not going to be grounded for 5 years. We're going to be understanding about it, but at the same time, it's still not legal.
It's almost enabling.
It's not good. It's enabling. It's not good for your brain health. It's not good for your development. And so I walk the very fine line with that. In fact, it makes me want to tell you about the 4 parenting styles that I talk about a lot. It's very well researched. So there's 4 styles, and it's kind of like this quadrant, and the top left. So actually, if we do the axes, the horizontal is hold on, I'm trying to do my vertical
Yep,
and my horizontal. I have to visualize it in my head. The up and down. So the top is kind of like the loving, the bottom is more like unloving. The right is very with boundaries, and the left is no boundaries.
Oh, so you have loving on the top, unloving on the bottom, boundaries, lots of boundaries on the right, zero boundaries on the left.
Correct.
So can I guess where you want to be?
Yeah.
So if loving's on top and boundaries is the far right,
Yeah.
I'm assuming you might want to sort of hover, well, right in the middle. Well, I'm assuming near the top because you want to be loving. You want to be loving.
Yeah.
And you want to have some because we almost have the two opposite parents. My parents were on the boundaries,
Yeah.
never drink, never drive, or never drink, never do drugs. Whereas his mom, and I'm projecting a little bit,
Yeah.
but his mom was almost on like the other side where she's like, let me help you get drunk and
Right.
get high. So I feel like with the boundaries, you sort of want to be in the middle, and you definitely want to be somewhere on the high
Yeah.
point with the loving.
Yeah, so I think you have it right. So it's really the top right is the ideal, the love with the boundaries. But so you're saying, but not. And so let me just go through them all. And then
Please do. Yes.
Okay. So the top left is the helicopter parent. So they're so loving, but they have no boundaries. They have a hard time saying no. They don't want their child to ever feel pain. They don't want their child to feel any discomfort. If their child's hungry at school and they forgot their lunch, they're like door dashing and Uber Eats lunch for their kid at school. They're like letting them have the world. The bottom left is the no boundaries and the no love. And so that is the permissive parent. So they're very checked out. They're kind of in their own world. They're either working a lot, they're partying a lot. They're doing something where they're just somehow avoiding the relationship. They might even be home, but for whatever reason, emotional intimacy is difficult for them, probably something from their past. And so they're just not very involved in their kid's life. And so they're not setting boundaries and they're not showing them active love. So then the bottom right is lots of boundaries, but little love. And so that is like what I call the military style parent. They are so strict. I don't know if you know the movie Girls Just Want to Have Fun. Okay.
Sorry.
Oh my gosh. You have to watch that.
Okay.
And it's this like literally militant where there is so many rules and we don't care if you feel left out or if you feel excluded. We're going to say no to this and we don't care about your feelings. Right? And so we want to be on the top right where we care about your feelings. Your feelings are important to us. Your feelings matter. But at the end of the day, we're still the parent and we still get to make the decision. So that's where the boundaries come in. And so it's fine. It's a fine line to constantly balance that. That's why the healthiest style is actually the most difficult because it's a constant balancing act of finding the right space for what feels comfortable for you. And what feels comfortable for one parent might be different than for another parent. So that's why I can't give hard, fast rules. Like, no, that mom shouldn't do that because I'm like, well, there's something loving about that. There is some boundaries about that because she's saying the boundary is don't ever get in a car with someone who's been drinking or don't ever drive drunk. So the boundary is you can drink as long as you're safe and you're with me. So it's like, well, it's not the worst thing I've ever heard. It's also not the best thing, you know?
You definitely reminded me of when it comes to the military style. I feel like that was my dad. So one of the more innocent, comical stories that my mom likes to bring up every now and then was that we had this table in the middle of the family room, but the center of it was glass, and so I wasn't allowed to stand on it because obviously, if I get too heavy as I'm growing, could fall through, break the glass on the feet, problematic.
Yeah.
So. Almost nightly, I guess, for a couple of weeks, when I saw him pull up from work, I would go jump on the table and be standing on it while he walked through the door. And that is like the definition of our relationship is feeling no love from him. And the only thing I remember was all the rules he had in place, how I would break them. One of two things would happen. I'd either break them even though I was trying to please him and there's no room for forgiveness, or I would break them just because I thought it was comical to see how pissed off he'd get.
Yeah.
And so that it's funny, like looking at it from the kid's perspective of he was setting all these rules in place. And then if he ever irritated me, I would just go break those rules because I thought it was funny to see how unhinged he would get.
Yeah. Right.
Terrible.
You sound like a great guy.
Right, yeah. As a terrible kid growing up. Wow, yeah, kids can be awful.
Yeah.
Too.
Yeah. I can see how that'd be amusing. Like, oh, let's upset dad.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I have a very personal question to ask you.
Okay.
Is there anything that you're afraid of on your children's behalf?
You mean in the world?
Yeah. Is there any fears? I think all of us are afraid of some things, right? Like, for example, Austin we had this cold warning, right? And I think that a lot of people probably had some fear around. I personally had some fear around, like, what if my power goes out again? I lost power for 6 days last year. Maybe not fear is the right word. But like when I think just all of us have things that we're afraid of. Is there anything that you're afraid of for your kids?
Yeah, unfortunately, my entire time as a parent, I've like, for whatever reason, I'm afraid of my child getting kidnapped or getting somehow sold as a sex slave or sex, whatever they call it these days. I know the word, but I just can't. It's slipping me right now. Because that is the most helpless situation. I don't know if you saw the movie. Can't think of it right now, but there is a movie that it was about a guy that was his job, was to convict sex felons or sex. I can't think of what is the word right now. Like, sex predators.
Okay.
I think that's the word I'm trying to get.
Okay.
And these kids were, kidnapped from their homes, and it was all over the world, but they were kidnapped, or they were like said, oh, would your child like to be a model, or would they like to be a singer? And they bring them into this little camp and say, oh, we're going to do these auditions. And then the parent goes back later to pick them up and their kids are gone. And that is the most frightening thing I can think of for any parent, where you're completely helpless and there's nothing you can do about it because you don't know where they are.
Yeah.
I don't know. I don't know if that was helpful. I'm not sure if that was, but other than that, I try to not have fear. I actively work on not having fear, because fear doesn't really serve a purpose other than, like you're saying, the gift of fear, right? We want to ask ourselves what's rational and what's not rational, what's reasonable, what's not reasonable. I actually have a client who goes to community college, and she just started at a new campus downtown, and so she has to park in a parking garage and walk to class every day. Well, it's during the daytime, but she even finds herself getting very nervous just walking down the street, because there's just like, people on drugs and homeless people, and it makes her feel uncomfortable. So when she gets to class, she finds herself in an extremely anxious state. And so I said, okay, well, how is your fear, your anxiety serving you in this situation? Could it be keeping you safe? Is it helpful? Is it making you more aware? She said, well, yeah, it makes me come up with a plan. So I decide like where I want to park, how I want to walk, blah, blah, blah. I'm like, what about how you hold your phone? Like, do you hold your phone with you in case there's emergency? You can, get help as soon as possible. She's like, yeah, that's good. Right? So there's a certain level of fear that is healthy for us, that's important. And then there becomes the irrational fear. So I'm not going to worry about all the irrational fears and things I can't control.
Yeah. Have you, just out of curiosity, have you ever asked her if she wears headphones from the car to class or vice versa?
No, but that's a really good question. Because then she would be aware of her surroundings. Is that what you're saying? Yeah.
Yeah, this one of the biggest, well, not biggest, but they had a section of the book where they were just talking about how when you put both your headphones in, you're almost numbing your sense of hearing. And so if there's someone that's coming, you just, even if you take out one, you really want to have that music or that podcast in. Excuse me. You really want to have that music or that podcast and at least take out one, so that way you can still be aware of everything around you. Yeah, the other analogy, or the question I would pose to you is, let's say there's a wolf or a fox, and that wolf or fox is walking up they see a steel box, and there's another wolf within that steel box, and that wolf, they just have a feeling that it's a predator. And if they get in this box, it has no windows, it's soundproof, the door's going to go close behind them when they get in. Laura, do you think the wolf is going to get in that steel box?
No.
So when a person walks up to an elevator in a parking garage, and there's another person already in the elevator, and they have a bad sense of that person, why are we the only species that gets in the box? Because we're worried about offending the person. If we go ahead and say, I'll take the next one.
Yeah, we are. We do that. Because we don't want to feel guilty or bad or shame that we're judging somebody. Oh, maybe they're actually a really nice person, and we shamed them that they're scary. So we don't want to do that.
It's weird.
It's uncomfortable for us.
Yeah.
Humans don't like to feel uncomfortable.
Yeah. Is there any particular topic, subject, anything you're really fired up about right now? Or is it sort of just helping people as a whole?
That's a really big question, so I really want to make sure I can think through that all the way. I think it's kind of just what the theme is, which is to feel good about yourself so that you don't make bad decisions or so that you don't hurt other people. Did that make sense?
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, I was trying to think. The first question that came back in mind, I was like, no, don't ask that. It's way too broad, but we've also been sort of talking about it without talking about it the whole time we've been here, is how do we feel better about ourselves? But like I said, we've sort of been talking about it the whole time without talking about it directly.
Well, people are the hardest on themselves.
Yeah, we
They're
are.
their own biggest critic.
Yep.
So we look in the mirror and we see all the things that are wrong with us. And when we realize that other people who are looking at us, they just look at the complete person. They don't see our individual flaws. Or even if they were to notice something about us, they're going to not like us because of that, you know? And so when we realize that, we are all flawed. Like, we all have things about us that, let's say I was super self-conscious because I've got, freckles on my hand and I've got wrinkles on my hand. Is that going to make me like not want to shake your hand or not go out throughout my life? I'm like, no, because you know why? I'm 47. Of course I have some freckles and of course I have some wrinkles, right? I kind of earned these. I earned these.
Yeah.
I've been working real hard for 47 years to be me.
Yeah, that's a good point. I was thinking too the other day about, I sort of had it was a good thing in hindsight. For my day job last week, we had a rough team meeting where our manager sort of threw everyone under the bus, and I got a few phone calls afterwards of people who were just so pissed off. And then after taking those 5 phone calls, I was just emotionally drained because I was also thrown under the bus. And then I took those calls to let them all vent. And then I went to the gym and I was just pissed off as hell. And it was a reminder, as well as I was just sort of working out, that like on the outside, nobody had any idea that I was just raging. You have no idea what's going on in other people's heads. We only see what we see, the clothes that they're wearing. He's bald, he has a beard, he's doing back day, whatever. But it goes back to my point about the guy that made fun of me in high school and then the guy that came on the podcast, is that we just have no idea. One of my biggest goals over the last 2, 3, 4 years that I am working on to this day is to stop judging people, because you have no idea what that person who cut you off is going on in their personal life. I'm almost making up stories on their behalf. I'm playing devil's advocate for them. When I think someone has quote unquote wronged me, or when I get internally, I start to judge that person because of what they're wearing, what they're doing, how they look, whatever it is. I try to give myself a moment to pause and just reflect that what if they're me in that situation? What if they just got chewed out by their boss? And then, you don't know. And so that's something that I've been trying to do more, is just pause and not be so quick to judge someone.
Yeah, I really do the same thing. For 2 reasons. One is, when I was going through the hardest time, I was going through actually some mental health stuff during the process of my divorce. I was very stressed. I was very anxious. It's very overwhelming to take 4 kids' lives and shatter it and be like, okay, we're going to sell our house. We now have to move, blah, blah. It's a lot of transition, a lot of stress, a lot of change. And so if somebody had been judging me for the way that I had been conducting myself during that time, or the decisions that I made, I would be like, well, you don't know what it's like to be me and to be in my position. So because I would want that same gift from others, I try to give that to other people and just say, I have no idea what it's like to be you. I don't know why you do what you do, and I'm not sure I understand it, but I can't understand it, so I'm not going to judge it. But there was one other thing I was going to say, and that is, it kind of goes back to the being curious and less judgmental. Like, let's try to understand instead of judging, because I know what I was going to say. Humans inherently want to feel connected with one another, and so judgment is the one thing that breaks that connection, right? You can't be in connection with someone if you're judging them at the same time. Those two things cannot coexist. And so it's like, well, ultimately we want to connect, so it's like, why don't you get over whatever you're judging this person about, which is probably something that you have. It's your own projection of your own insecurities. That's why we judge. Right? There's got to be something about that is making us feel insecure, that we feel the need to mentally put someone else down, or be like, why the heck are they wearing that? Or why did they say that? Or why are they doing that?
I have a question for you.
Okay.
I think I have 3 or 4 before we wrap up.
Okay.
Let me actually ask you first. First off, thank you for answering all of my questions. You've been so genuine and so vulnerable and so transparent. Did you have fun today?
Yeah. Oh,
right,
totally.
Good. Yeah.
Totally,
I feel like we created a great episode. I can't wait to release this one.
Yeah.
Is there anything that we haven't talked about yet that you wanted to bring up today?
Well, there was one thing as we were talking that I realized I feel like would be helpful.
Yeah.
It's not that I want to talk about it, but I think it's helpful is to understand really what mental health is. And so mental health can very easily be, if you Google it, you'll see like 1,000,000,000 definitions of like what it is and da, da, da. And really, in the most simple terms, it's the health of our thoughts. So it's the thoughts about ourselves, others, and the world around us that determines what our mental health is. And to even simpler ways, it can be positive, it can be negative. So if we're judging somebody, that's kind of a negative thought. If we're thinking bad things, if we're in fear or shame or jealousy or insecurity, that's kind of some negative thinking about ourselves and other people. If we shift those to a more positive mindset, then we're going to have good mental health because our thoughts are healthy.
There is oh man. I was listening to this random a workout playlist of rock songs the other day, and one of the lines, I wish I jotted down the song. I could probably find it, but one of the lines was like, I would never treat people the way I treat myself.
Yeah.
Like, that's true for me today. So
Yeah.
sometimes I feel like I F up an episode. I feel like I should have asked a different question, asked a question a different way, mess up for my day job at work, and I will just mentally beat myself up. But if you came to me and you told me that you did the exact same thing wrong that I did, I'd be like, whatever. Not whatever, in an excusing way.
Right.
But I would never spend 24 hours judging you the way I spend 24 hours judging myself.
Yeah, that's self-compassion. That's the practice of self-compassion, is treating yourself the way you would treat a friend. And I don't know if you know the research by Kristen Neff. She's actually did her research at University of Texas.
Okay.
And so she has 3 elements of self-compassion. I can't know if I like recall those off the top of my head, other than that's something actually I use in my coaching quite a bit, because I say, well, what would you say to a friend right now if she was in the situation? What would be your advice to her? How would you make her feel better? How would you console her? Well, and so when you can put it onto somebody else, it's so much easier to treat someone else with kindness. And then I just say, well, why wouldn't you say that to yourself? And then they're like, oh,
Yeah.
I don't know.
If there is a teen or a parent or anyone that wants to either follow you, listen to your podcast, potentially even get coached by you, where can we find you?
Yeah, the easiest thing is just my website, positivelyhealthycoaching.com. And same with social media, just Positively Healthy Coaching are my handles on social media. So that's how they can find me.
Even in just your Instagram account, it's so helpful. There's so that you just give out for free generously. There's so many good posts and videos, plus your podcast. So if a teen or a parent, or I'm not a teen or a parent, and I find your content useful, so
thank you.
please go. No matter who you are, just go. Go to her Instagram if you've been thinking. I had a friend once. Here's my pitch to why a parent or a teen should reach out to you. I had a friend once tell me that we can only see what's in front of us. But if you get a coach, a therapist, even a friend to talk to, that person, I can look above you, behind you, to your left, to your right, below you. And so outside opinions from someone that you feel like you can trust, not just anybody, someone you feel like you can trust, are so valuable, because we have the ability to step out of that situation and see all the factors and ask you some questions and help you get to a solution. Yeah. So if you've been in, a dark place, or you've been depressed or anxious or feeling guilty, or you're that kid that has the parent that's abusing alcohol and you need someone to vent to, please reach out to Laura, have an initial conversation with her, and see if she can help you.
Awesome. Well, thank you. I appreciate that vote of confidence.
Of course.
Yeah. And the other thing which I didn't mention, which I one of my very favorite things to do is actually I do joint sessions with a parent and the teenager together. So it's almost like marriage therapy, except for it's parent and child. And the reason why I really developed those skills was because, in my marriage, when there were problems and before the divorce, I had to educate myself on how can I improve this relationship. That's where I got kind of a lot of these communication skills from, is like, how can I and also I'm a middle child. So I was always the peacemaker. Like, I'm kind of like constantly trying to keep everybody at peace. And so I like to say I'm the neutral third party. I'm not taking mom's side. I'm not taking daughter's side. Right. I'm just here to help both of you together to create a win-win. And so that's actually one of my very favorite things to do.
One of the things that I love that was said by a prior guest is that he's the owner of a CrossFit gym. And one of the most rewarding things that he wasn't expecting was parents and kids who come into work out together. And cool. They have got several I don't want to say reports, feedback from multiple families saying that before we found you guys, we had problems A, B, and C in our relationship. And then we started working out together and we never brought these problems to you guys. And you never knew these problems existed. But as we came into your gym and we worked out together and we got to that common goal and we were breaking sweats and we were hitting PRs and we were accomplishing all these things, we just saw this ripple effect in our personal life.
I love that.
So
That's so
I
cool.
love the idea that you're
Yeah.
also doing sessions with the kid and the
Yes.
parent of this. That's awesome.
Yeah, it's really fun.
So my two more questions for you. Second to last is this. This camera is on you right now, and imagine that there are thousands of teens that are watching this episode, and you had 60 seconds to talk with them. If you could say anything you wanted to these teens, what would you say to them?
Yeah. Figure out what you like about yourself. Make that list. Put it up on your mirror. Tell yourself I love you. Say I love you to yourself and use your name in the mirror. That's actually a coaching exercise. It's called the mirror exercise. Figure out what your strengths are. Figure out what your passions are. And really find the best of your personality. I think we tend to focus on, what we don't have. We're not funny enough. We're not smart enough. We're not this enough. And that's the thing. It's like you could spend the rest of your life comparing yourself to the others. There's always going to be someone with more money. There's always going to be somebody more attractive. There's always going to be someone richer, whatever, more successful. And is that really how you want to live the next, 80, 90, 100 years of your life, feeling bad or feeling insecure or comparing yourselves together? It's like, why not just decide right now? I like to kind of rip it like a Band-Aid and say, I'm going to start feeling good about myself today so that I don't waste the rest of my life constantly feeling bad or in pain or sad or not good about myself.
That's awesome. That was awesome.
Thanks.
Yeah, well said. Very articulate. Last question for you is this. I'm trying something new for a couple of episodes just to see how it goes.
Okay.
And as I'm listening to other podcasts, I will admit I'm stealing some of my favorite questions that they ask.
You can do that.
And asking them to some of my
It's
guests.
called repurposing.
I'm repurposing. That's such a better word than stealing. I just like to be honest. I'm not going to lie and be like, oh, yeah, I thought of this really cool question.
Yeah.
No, I'm repurposing it.
Yeah.
This one is one I think is going to be, I'm really curious to see how you're going to answer it. Is there someone in your life that really needs your help, but you're unsure of how to help them?
That is a hard question. I honestly think the unsure part, I could help anybody. So I think I'm pretty sure about that. I think I have certainty about that. Are there people that they just need to come to me? Then yes.
Yeah, right.
That's all they need to do.
Yeah. Totally.
I can't exactly go up to somebody and say, hey, I've noticed you have some problems. Do you need my help?
Right.
Right. It doesn't work that way. They have to come to me.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Are you grateful for where you're at in life right now?
Oh, totally.
You have I feel like you're in a pretty awesome position.
Yeah.
And I say that because, like I said, I have these 3 or 4 people that for one random reason or another will come up to me in the gym and will almost halt our workouts to talk for. We've talked for up to an hour sometimes. I'm like, holy cow, that went by quick. And I end up just going home because at that point, I'm not even in gym mode anymore. But, just being able to help people consistently day in and day out seems like it would just be such an awesome job. I'm very grateful for you. I'm very happy for you. And I'm very proud of everything that you went through and that you got to where you are today. And that, your life could have gone one of 2 different directions. You could have said, woe is me. I can't raise these kids. How am I going to make money?
Yeah.
I don't have my husband, but you didn't. You fucking took life by the horns.
Yeah.
Sorry, I try not.
Oh yeah, love it.
You took life by the horns.
That's why I'm a badass.
Look at where you're at. You are a badass. That was such one of the compliments that I got a couple months ago. A guy came up to me in the gym and he said, "My friend over there wanted me to tell you look like a Viking."
Oh,
right on. I love it. That's not bad at all.
Yeah.
So yeah, give strangers compliments, and everyone, I hope that you got a lot out of today's episode. If you did listen to us the entire time, first off, thank you as well for tuning in today and for listening to this episode. If you liked it, please, if you're listening on Spotify, give the pod a 5-star review there. If you're listening on Apple Podcasts, you can give a 5-star review and a written review. So talk to me about what you liked about this episode. If you want to give Laura a message, please feel free to write it down. I'll pass it on to her. If you want to talk about the episode specifically, the show in general, I would love to hear back from you. If you're watching on YouTube, subscribe to that channel. And I think that's it.
Awesome.
Are we good to go?
Yeah, I think we're good to go.
All right, everyone. Stay healthy. Stay happy. See you next Saturday. Bye.